Chapter 424. The so-called torture of the Aboriginals wasn't torture, but torture. These guys couldn't play such tricks. In the 60,000 mountains, they were fighting against the heavens and the earth for their lives. They didn't have the mood to do such things. In their opinion, killing people was just a matter of nodding to the ground. If they didn't like it, they could just kill them. They didn't have so many tricks up their sleeves to torture people. Even if they left the mountains and established a nation, it would only last for a few decades. They would be extremely poor, and there were other countries eyeing them covetously. They didn't have the time to think about such things. The scaly whip was dipped in salt water, and with a shake, the scales exploded. It tore off a piece of flesh from the back. Even the Aboriginals would have to lie in bed for a few days after being whipped 3 times, let alone ordinary people. 3 lashes would leave them half dead. The people who were captured weren't tough, but it didn't matter even if they were. Rinpoche could capture them again with a call. In Rinpoche's heart, these How Nation immigrants had nothing to do with him. After the war, they were just numbers in his heart. He had seen many dead people, and it didn't matter if a few more innocent people died. Where there were people, there would be conflicts. If there were more than one person, there would be differences in status. If there were more than 2 people, there would be gangs. This was the case even among the How Nation immigrants who were kept in captivity. Not only were there differences in status, but there were also conflicts in sections. This was what Rinpoche learned in the past few days in Goose City. There were 67 big and small cities and hundreds of sects in Tianjin Basin. Back then, the rebels took the How Nation immigrants into the basin and divided them into various powers. There were also many conflicts between them. The most ordinary people were naturally the ordinary people. Above them were the army and the sections. The army belonged to the big powers, and the sects belonged to the small powers. There were conflicts between the sects, and there would be disciples who entered the army to wield power. There were 3 main forces in Tianjin Basin, and each of them governed dozens of cities. Moreover, these 3 forces were not as united as a piece of iron. The leaders of the rebel army, big and small, had become city lords and city officials in the blink of an eye. There weren't many soldiers, only about 200,000. After all, the Protectorate of the South was watching, and they wouldn't sit back and watch them grow. Moreover, they had also changed their names. They used the name of the City Defense Army, and there were only a few thousand to 10,000 of them scattered across each city. After all, they still belonged to Deo. The imperial court could still tolerate a few thousand soldiers guarding a city. However, if they established their own army, then they wouldn't be able to tolerate it. That would be the path to their deaths. Back then, those rebels had been beaten to the brink of death. Now, they only dared to play some tricks under the table. Naturally, they didn't dare to stir up trouble in public. If they stepped out of line, even the agreement from back then wouldn't be able to protect them. As for the sects, although there were more than 100 of them, their overall strength was not strong. Some of the stronger ones escaped from Deo and went to other nations. The rest were either weak or couldn't bear to leave their homeland. Although there were still some experts left, they couldn't raise any waves. Moreover, Shiwanya was still keeping an eye on them. From time to time, if he discovered any signs of trouble, he would pull out a group of people to be sacrificed. A few days ago, when they fought with Great Xia, they killed tens of thousands of people. Rinpoche stayed in Goose City for a few days. Other than the information he obtained from the few remnant citizens of the How Nation, he also obtained information from Shiwanya. Although he hadn't entered the basin and didn't see it with his own eyes, he had a rough idea of the situation there. He just had to go in and see it with his own eyes to verify the information he had obtained. Rinpoche closed a booklet that contained some of the things he had sorted out over the past few days. After leaving the room, he turned into a few courtyards and heard the sound of stringed instruments coming from another courtyard. Upon entering the courtyard, he saw a man and a woman playing a bamboo musical instrument. It was somewhat like a flute, but it was only the length of a palm. The sound wasn't as desolate and resentful as the flute, but it still had a unique flavor. The Empress was eating fruits in her room. Beside her was the candy tree. Wherever the Empress went, the tree would be planted. Renbochin was even prepared to install a frame under the tree and install 4 wheels. "How is it?" the Empress asked when she saw him striding in. "I have to go and take a look to find out," Renbochin replied softly. He sat beside the Empress, took a fruit from the plate, and took a bite. It melted in his mouth and tasted sweet and delicious. These were all good things that Shiwanya had sent to the Empress. "When are you leaving?" The Empress's eyes lit up. She was also bored of staying here. She wasn't interested in the things that Renbochin did. She came out this time to see what those fellows who were protected by Deo were like. On the other hand, she wasn't willing to be separated from Renbochin for a few months. "I'm afraid that I will have to split up with your Majesty," Renbochin said. If he were to travel with the Empress, he would be a big target and was afraid that he wouldn't be able to see anything. The Empress was a little disappointed, but she knew that this was a serious matter. "Your Majesty, do you want to go back with me?" "I will set off after I return," Renbochin asked. Previously, he had said that he wanted to see Chi Jiayu, but these days, he had been on the road and the Empress hadn't followed him back to Earth. He actually wanted to settle this matter quickly. In the end, he also had an idea of what to do. He would kill those who needed to be killed so that he wouldn't have to worry about her. "Then let's go and take a look." The Empress nodded and instructed Qin Yuan and Hong Wuan. With one hand holding Renbochin's wrist, the two disappeared from the room. After a while, Qin Yuan and Hong Wuan went out to let the 2 people who were playing outside leave. After returning to Earth, the 2 of them changed their clothes. At this time, it was the end of midsummer and the weather was very hot. Renbochin actually wanted to ask the Empress if she wanted to go for a swim. He couldn't forget about this matter. Thinking about the Empress in a swimsuit, it really made him excited. However, there was still a serious matter at this time. "Your Majesty, do you still remember the person that I mentioned previously who looks like you?" Renbochin asked. "I'm somewhat interested, but since you want me to see him so much, I'm afraid that there's something going on." The Empress smiled and looked at him. Every time she returned here, she could always relax a lot. Here, she wasn't the Empress of Deo. "There is indeed." Renbochin nodded. "However, I need your Majesty to take a look first." "All right." Seeing that he was serious, the Empress nodded. Although he was usually not a serious person, since he said that there was something going on, then she really had to go and take a look. "Your Majesty, a new phone." Renbochin wasn't in a hurry to leave. First, he took out something from the hands behind his back. It was a red phone. "Is it a little different from the previous one?" The Empress looked at this phone. It was slightly narrower. When she held it in her hand, it was actually soft. "It's indeed different." Renbochin held the Empress's hand and wrapped the phone around her wrist. It was as if she had an additional watch. "It's all like this now." Renbochin smiled and said. With the emergence of the flexible screen, this type of phone had become a new technology. In fact, it had already appeared 2 years ago, but it was only now that it was on the market. "It's indeed convenient." The Empress nodded. "Let's go." Renbochin pulled the Empress to the car and drove away. After a while, they arrived at the entrance of SH University. When they were at the villa, he checked the date and compared it to Chi Jiayu's class schedule. She should be in class today. The 2 of them walked into the campus. This kind of ivory tower was different from society. It was much simpler. Students coming and going were holding books, and it was filled with an academic atmosphere. Is this Xiao's first time coming to a university? Renbochin held the Empress's hand and walked on campus like a couple. It's indeed my first time. The Empress nodded her head. Previously, Renbochin had brought her to elementary schools. She had seen how those 10-year-old children were studying in school. Now that she looked at the university again, it was indeed somewhat different. This made her extremely envious. Fortunately, Dayo had its own school now. Even though there weren't many students, they were seeds that would sprout sooner or later. The two of them walked on campus. The Empress's appearance and temperament were eye-catching no matter where she went, let alone these ivory tower students who were fantasizing about love. The Empress's eyes almost popped out when she saw the Empress. She thought to herself, there's actually such a girl in school. Why haven't I heard of her before? However, looking at the hand that Renbochin was holding, she couldn't help but curse in her heart, all the good cabbages have been taken by pigs. Chapter 425. As the bell rang, there was a commotion in the school building. Students started to run out of the building. As more and more people came out, Renbochin's gaze searched the crowd. The place where both of them were standing wasn't considered too remote. The field of vision was good, and everyone could see them. Especially when they saw the Empress, many of them were surprised and felt that she looked inexplicably familiar. After all, some of these students were Qi Jiayu's classmates. They are out, Renbochin said faintly when he saw a face in the crowd. Although the face was almost the same, when Renbochin saw the lady in the crowd, his gaze was very cold. The Empress followed his gaze and saw the lady who looked similar to her. A strong killing intent emanated from the bottom of her heart. She raised her eyebrows, her hair fluttered without any wind, and the surroundings became colder. It's a very strange feeling, the Empress said coldly. At this moment, she knew why Renbochin asked her to take a look. Renbochin could feel the murderous aura from her body. He wasn't surprised at all. I felt the same when I saw the seventh prince. Is there a connection? The Empress could hear the hidden meaning in his words. Perhaps there is a connection that we don't know about. Renbochin didn't know what the connection was, but he knew that this kind of killing intent wasn't without reason. While the two of them were talking, Qi Jiayu also felt something and looked in their direction. When she saw the Empress's face, she was stunned. Then, she couldn't hide the shock on her face and stopped in her tracks. When her classmates saw her reaction and noticed this, they were all surprised. Don't kill here, Renbochin said softly when he felt the Empress's killing intent getting stronger. Those days when he just came back from the battlefield, his killing intent was too strong, and he was somewhat demonic. These days of peaceful life had reduced his killing intent by a lot. This time, he could control himself and remember the promise he made. Qi Jiayu walked towards the two of them, looked at Renbochin, and asked doubtfully, "This is?" She always knew that she was very beautiful, and it wouldn't be surprising if she met someone prettier than her. However, she didn't expect to meet a lady who looked so similar to her and had a better temperament than her. Compared to her, although their looks were very similar, she was a Cinderella, and the other party was like a princess. She had an urge to become like him. The aura of the other party and the feeling of being superior made her feel an indescribable sense of envy and jealousy. Renbochin carefully looked into her eyes and indeed saw the hostility in them. However, she was just an ordinary girl and wouldn't have the same immediate killing intent as him and the Empress. Indeed, it's very similar. This world is really wonderful. Renbochin smiled, but no one could tell that he was indifferent just now. Did you come all the way here just to find me? Qi Jiayu hid her thoughts and asked with a smile. You could say so. She heard that someone looked like her, so she came to take a look out of curiosity, Renbochin said with a smile. Now that I've seen it, it's time to go. Oh. Qi Jiayu didn't know how to reply. The Empress's appearance made her feel very uneasy. She had forced herself to squeeze out that smile just now. Let's go. Renbochin held the Empress's hand. Before he turned around and left, he nodded at Qi Jiayu and said, "Goodbye." He was afraid that if the Empress stayed any longer, there would be a murder in this university. Qi Jiayu stared blankly at the two of them holding hands and leaving. She even forgot to ask about what Renbochin told her previously. He said that she would meet those people, but she hadn't met them even after a few months. She originally wanted to ask, but now, she had forgotten about it. How is it? Renbochin leaned back on the seat and turned to look at the Empress. It's very strange. I want to kill her. The Empress looked a little doubtful. She was different from Renbochin. She was the fifth most powerful expert in the world, and she had always controlled her state of mind very well. It was very strange that a stranger could make her feel like killing. She wanted to find out the reason more than Renbochin. You said that you felt the same way when you saw the seventh prince of Great Xia. The Empress asked. Yes, the seventh prince must have felt the same way, Renbochin said faintly. When I saw her that day, I felt like killing her. At that time, I didn't know why. Later on, I found out that you have a trace of soul in my body and knew that she has the same connection with you. Do you have any thoughts? The Empress asked. A little. Renbochin nodded his head and told her what he thought at that time. There was a movie in the past that had an interesting concept. There were countless versions of himself in countless parallel worlds. Every time he killed one of them, he would become stronger. After the seventh prince died, did anything change in your body? The Empress asked. I entered re-visualization a few days after the seventh prince died. I don't know if there is any connection between the two. Renbochin wasn't very clear about this matter, but he was afraid that there might be some changes in his thinking. This was because he entered re-visualization on those 2 days. It was too coincidental. The Empress was silent for a long time before saying, "Keep her alive, don't let her die. She might be useful when I want to break through to the cardinal heaven level. I have this feeling." The Empress was already at the peak of the cardinal heaven level. If she broke through again, she would reach longevity heaven, which was the strength of the first emperor. After the first emperor reached everlasting heaven, he left with his ministers and powerful army, never to be seen again. Renbochin was slightly worried after hearing what the Empress said. How long do you need to break through? 3 to 5 years if it's fast, decades if it's slow. The Empress wasn't sure either. She was still one step away from reaching that barrier. She wasn't sure how long this step would take. Decades is more than 100 years on Earth. I can't protect her for that long. Even her bones won't be left. Renbochin laughed. He then asked, if you reach longevity heaven, will you leave Dao? Like the first emperor. The Empress was silent. After a while, she said, I don't know what happened. Maybe I will only know when I'm there. If you want to leave, remember to bring me along. Renbochin held her hand. It was delicate, soft, and his tone was sincere. The first emperor didn't come back, and I don't know if he's dead or alive. None of the people who went back then came back. I'm afraid there's a great danger inside. I've said it before. Even if I'm in hell, I'll look up at the sky to see you. Renbochin put his face next to the Empress's cheek. The Empress thought that he wanted to kiss her and was moved by his words. She didn't expect him to just gently rub against her cheek. Both of their cheeks touched and felt each other's warmth. The Empress's fragrance also reached Renbochin's nose. Both of their hearts were filled with tenderness. Your Majesty, you have to wait for me. If you break through, I'm afraid we won't know when we can get married and have children. Renbochin retracted his head and said with a smile. The Empress was a little embarrassed and slapped his hand. Pow! Renbochin touched the back of his hand, which was red and swollen. He got used to it. However, he really had to hurry up. If the Empress really broke through, then he really didn't know when they could get married. He didn't know how long it would take for Ningcaichen's Shueke to arrive. Not only did he have to reach the earth will level, but he also had to reach the spirit will level. Otherwise, how could he keep up with the Empress's footsteps? He hoped that the Empress would slow down a little. He hadn't built Dayo into what she wanted it to be. However, if she was too slow, he was afraid that Qi Jiayu wouldn't live that long. He had to put in more effort. Chapter 426. Both of you came at the right time. I'm going out for a while. Why don't you come and take a look together? Yang Sen stood up when he saw Renbochin. Does it have anything to do with us? Renbochin asked. A little. Let's talk on the way, Yang Sen said. Yang Sen spoke after the 3 cars had driven out of the underground parking lot of the Messier 87 building. Speaking of which, this matter doesn't have much to do with the 2 of you. Instead, it has something to do with the cultivation method that the 2 of you brought. Following Yang Sen's narration, Renbochin found out about something interesting. A man-will expert had appeared on Earth, a true man-will expert. Furthermore, he was an outsider and had to train hard to reach this level. One had to know that Earth did not have systematic cultivation techniques like the other world. Although there were also people who cultivated Taoism, Buddhism, or martial arts, they walked a completely different path. Due to the limitations of the environment, it was difficult for him to achieve too much. After Renbochin took out the martial arts manual, a group of such experts broke through to the man-will level in a short period of time. However, this person had read extensively, summed up the experiences of the predecessors, and after many years of hard work, he created a set of martial arts that could allow him to attain the man-will level. This was something that not many people could achieve. From this point alone, this person could be considered to be extremely outstanding. The problem was not this, but something else. This person had been training hard for many years and broke through the limit in one fell swoop to reach the man-will level. He was full of mettle and thought that he was the #1 expert in the world. He thought to himself that since ancient times, no one could surpass him. Based on the foundation of his predecessors, he had taken a huge step forward in his cultivation method and reached a new realm. He had trained hard for decades and was invincible in the world. He couldn't possibly continue to hole up in the mountains, right? If one does not return to one's hometown after becoming rich, it is like walking at night in brocade clothes. This person had been holding back for decades, so he naturally wouldn't act like this now. Instead, he was preparing to become famous overnight. He sent out hero invitations to the so-called Wulin people and set up a challenge to meet all the heroes of the world. If it was just based on the advancement of his cultivation method, it was admirable. Unfortunately, he was a little too arrogant. Hundreds of experts who had attained the man-will level through the techniques provided by Renbochin were ready to surround and kick him. A certain person had trained hard in the deep mountains for dozens of years, and when he came out, he thought that he was #1 in the world. In the end, the outside world had changed, and even a child had such strength. That was roughly what it meant. It was very graphic, but also very unlucky. If Renbochin hadn't provided him with the martial arts, he would have become famous overnight and everyone in the world would have recognized him. Even in history, his name would be recorded. Unfortunately, Renbochin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This person was indeed somewhat tragic. However, Yang Sen didn't let Renbochin and the Empress follow him just to see him. Instead, he looked at the people that the country nurtured. After all, their previous accumulations had already been exhausted after they entered the man-will level, so their cultivation speed would be very slow. He had long wanted to get pointers from Renbachien and the Empress, but the two of them often didn't go to Messier 87 for a few months. This time around, he took this opportunity to pull them over. This was especially so for the Empress. She came from a blessed land, and her strength far exceeded the limits of a human. If she could give him some pointers, he would be able to avoid a lot of detours. After understanding Yang Sen's thoughts, Renbachien turned his head and looked at the Empress. He saw that she was in a daze and did not know what she was thinking about. Renbachien reckoned that she was still thinking about Qi Jiayu. After driving for about 2 hours, they finally arrived at their destination. It was a villa district. There was a very large courtyard in front of a villa in the corner. In the middle of the courtyard was an arena that was surrounded by many people of all ages and genders. Some of them were holding weapons wrapped in cloth. From the shape, one could roughly tell that they were sabers or swords. There were also some that were wrapped so tightly that one couldn't tell what they were. One of them was a middle-aged man in a traditional Chinese suit. He had short hair and looked very energetic. His eyes were extremely lively when he closed them. Yang Sen led Renbachien and the Empress down, and someone immediately led them to the side to sit down. Director Yang. The people nearby greeted him in a low voice. Their voices weren't loud. After all, Yang Sen was an official, and it wasn't good to make a big fuss in this kind of place. After waiting for a long time, a group of people came out of the villa. One of them was tall and had a square face. His eyes were extremely lively, and he had a slight smile on his face. This person stood in the crowd and was the most eye-catching. Everyone sat down in the arena. Just now, someone went up to the stage to speak. Today, many people have gathered here. I believe it's because of the recent news. Senior Bai has mastered the martial arts of various sects and has finally taken another step forward on the path of the predecessors. After listening to the first 2 sentences, Renbachien started to feel a little bored. To put it bluntly, he was just bragging about his own achievements and then opening up the arena to meet the heroes. Will Senior Bai publicize this kind of martial arts? Someone in the surrounding crowd suddenly asked. As soon as this was said, a group of people immediately followed suit. After all, these people weren't here to fight in the arena, but to find a way to break through the limits. The person on the stage smiled faintly before continuing. If other people obtained this kind of martial arts, they naturally wouldn't publicize it. However, as the founder, Senior Bai is magnanimous and doesn't care about sectarian bias. He is willing to publicize his many years of painstaking efforts and compile the martial scripture, together with everyone. Following that, there was another uproar. Many people were asking what exactly this meant. It turned out that this time, not only did this person invite the heroes, but he also wanted to invite them to compile the martial scripture, together with the martial arts of various sects into it. As soon as this was said, the people below the stage immediately hesitated. Senior Bai, as the world's most powerful person, is willing to publicize this kind of martial arts and compile it into the martial scripture. Could it be that everyone still wants to retain the sectarian bias? That person on the stage asked. The world's most powerful person. Who admits it? Someone suddenly shouted from below. When Renbachien heard this, he finally perked up. Finally, there was going to be some excitement. He didn't come here to watch them have a big meeting. That so-called Senior Bai wasn't angry after hearing this. He stood up from his seat, and the joints in his body cracked. Then, he flashed and landed on the stage. His graceful movements attracted a lot of cheers. We can talk about the martial scripture later. This time, I invited everyone because I want to see the experts of this world. I wonder who would like to come up and have a look. The middle-aged man on the stage said in a clear voice. In his heart, he calculated that no matter what, there would definitely be objections. He would first show his martial arts on the stage and let them see it. Then, the rest would be much easier to discuss. He was still confident in his own martial arts. It wasn't that he looked down on the heroes of the world. In his eyes, except for him, everyone else was mediocre. "I'll go." Immediately, someone jumped onto the stage. "My name is Yang Huai, and I'm just a nobody. I want to see what the so-called world's most powerful person is capable of." The person who jumped onto the stage was a man in his early 30s with a very vigorous aura. Pfft. Cough, cough. Yang Sen, who was drinking tea below, immediately coughed when he saw the person who jumped onto the stage. He whispered to the side, "You should at least let him win 2 rounds. Why is he the first to go up? You can't slap him in the face like this." Previously, this Bai Yuhe was very arrogant. Yang Huai has been suppressing his anger for a long time to teach him a lesson, the person beside him whispered. When Renbochin saw Yang Sen's reaction, he immediately knew that this was a nurtured expert. At this moment, he was in high spirits. After all, he was also a Manwul expert, and he really wanted to see what the other Manwul experts were like. Especially on Earth, he grew up reading wuxia novels and wuxia movies. He had always been curious about martial arts such as Xingyi Quan, Liuhe Quan, Taiji Quan, and Baguazhang. Chapter 427. Renbochin focused his attention on the stage and waited to see the standard of the two. Although he wasn't very strong, he still had some eyesight. After all, in Dao, spirit will experts were everywhere, and earth will experts were inferior to dogs. He had seen many people with such strength, so his eyesight had also improved. Yang Huai didn't reveal anything when he jumped onto the stage. It was obvious that he didn't want his opponent to see his standard and was aiming to slap him in the face. Bai Yuhe was indeed fooled. Number 1 in the world. Although it's a compliment, I think I'm worthy of it. Bai Yuhe smiled. Although his tone was plain, the arrogance in his words couldn't be concealed. After all, he had advanced the martial arts of the predecessors by a huge step. This was something that many people couldn't achieve. Just this point alone was enough for him to be proud of. Unfortunately, he was wrong from the start. Times had changed. He had stayed in the mountains for decades to practice the peerless martial arts, but he fell behind the times the moment he came out. "We'll know after we try." Yang Huai stood opposite him and said. Everyone below was attentively waiting to see the match between the two. Both of them cupped their fists and greeted each other. This was etiquette. No matter what they thought, they still had to have basic etiquette. Martial ethics and etiquette had always been a part of traditional culture and were deeply ingrained in everyone's bones. After greeting each other, Bai Yuhe stretched out one hand and got into a half stance. He was waiting for his opponent to attack. He had made up his mind to win this first match beautifully. If both of them fought for half a day and barely won, he wouldn't be able to show off his skills. Seeing his stance, Yang Huai moved his feet and punched his opponent's chest. This punch whistled through the air, and Bai Yuhe was shocked. He couldn't see anything before, but from this punch, he could immediately tell that his opponent's strength wasn't much weaker than his. How is this possible? Bai Yuhe was shocked. He had reached this stage through deducing techniques and believed that he was far superior to the practitioners of today. How was it possible that someone who jumped onto the stage was at the same level as him? However, he didn't slow down at all and immediately exchanged blows with his opponent. The two of them exchanged a few blows, and everyone below became nervous. Whether it was speed or strength, the two of them were far superior to everyone else. The people below admitted that if they were the ones up there, they would probably be defeated within 2 blows. Although the strength of a Manwul expert was only at the standard of an ordinary person in Dao, it was actually far superior. One had to know that the strength of a Manwul expert was between 500 to 1,500 kilograms. Some gifted individuals could even exceed this amount. This is the strength of the arms. Previously, both of them had a much better foundation than Renbochin. After attaining the manwil level, their strength was now around 700 to 800 kilograms, which was far beyond what an ordinary person could compare with. In terms of speed, they were much faster than ordinary people. Ordinary people would not be able to see their movements clearly. For a time, they could only hear the sound of their bodies colliding. It was within everyone's expectations that Bai Yuhe possessed such strength. But the fact that Yang Huai, who had suddenly jumped onto the stage to challenge him, had such strength was beyond everyone's expectations. Immediately, many people started asking around. Which sect did this person come from? Who was his master? How could no one have heard of such an expert? Many people started to rejoice in Bai Yuhe's misfortune. Bai Yuhe had just ascended the stage, and he had already encountered such an expert. This was going to be interesting. Their physical fitness was about the same. What mattered now was the level of their punches and kicks. Although Bai Yuhe was a little arrogant, his wisdom could be seen from the fact that he was able to advance the martial arts of his predecessors by a huge step. Not only was he proficient in martial arts, but his punches and kicks were also extremely skilled. After exchanging 7 or 8 blows, Bai Yuhe's arm was like a huge spear as he blocked Yang Huai's crotch, sending him flying off the stage. Good skills. Bai Yuhe only stopped and praised Yang Huai after sending him off the stage. Let me try too. The other person immediately jumped onto the stage and asked, do you want to take a break? Bai Yuhe cupped his fists and said, let's begin. As the two of them exchanged blows, Bai Yuhe's face immediately turned strange. This person's strength was actually about the same as his and wasn't any weaker than the previous opponent. Where did these two experts come from? Bai Yuhe guessed. What made him even more puzzled was the other party's strength and speed. He had only reached this level after breaking through that boundary, so how did they achieve it? After another 7 or 8 blows, Bai Yuhe threw his opponent off the stage. Without waiting for him to catch his breath, another person jumped onto the stage. Let me try too. Bai Yuhe was speechless. This person's strength was actually about the same as his, and the difference between them was actually only in terms of punches and kicks. They were actually about the same in terms of physical fitness that he was most proud of, which allowed him to break through the boundary. How could he not be shocked? Previously, when the first and second people were fighting, he thought that they were exceptionally talented and would walk the same path as him. However, when 3 people like them jumped onto the stage consecutively, he began to feel that something was wrong. Not only did he feel that something was wrong, but the others also felt that something was wrong. These 3 people were all young, around 25 to 30 years old. Moreover, judging from their moves, they were obviously not from the same sect, yet they all had such strength. How could the audience not be suspicious? When the 4th person jumped onto the stage, Bai Yuhe began to ponder what exactly went wrong. When the 4th person was beaten off the stage, he had no choice but to rest on the stage for a while, and his expression began to fluctuate. He believed that his achievements had already surpassed those of his predecessors and far surpassed those of his generation. As soon as he left the mountain, he couldn't wait to challenge the outstanding heroes. He didn't expect 4 such experts to come up one after another. Were there too many experts in this world, or was he too weak? What exactly was going on? He began to doubt himself. Could it be that something big had happened in the outside world, that someone had already broken through to this level and announced it? However, as far as he knew, such a thing hadn't happened in the past few days. But what was going on now? After he had rested enough, a 5th person jumped onto the stage. This person was actually slightly stronger than the previous 4. This time, the 2 of them exchanged 30 to 40 moves, and he barely won by 1 move. Then, a 6th person jumped onto the stage. Bai Yuhe's face turned ashen. It wasn't that he couldn't beat them. He thought that he was already the #1 expert in the world after breaking through to this level. He didn't expect that a few random people who jumped onto the stage would all be this strong. Was the world changing too quickly, or was he ignorant? Could it be that everyone in the outside world was this strong? Wasn't his actions a joke? He wasn't the only one who felt this way. The audience felt the same way as well. They weren't blind, and they could naturally tell that the people who were fighting on the stage were stronger than them. It was easy to understand if one or two of such people appeared, but when so many of them appeared at once, they began to wonder if they were useless. The nation had nurtured these people through Rinpoche's martial arts. This time, they only wanted to give Bai Yuha a slap in the face, but they didn't expect that they would destroy the confidence of Bai Yuha and the others. "This person isn't bad," Rinpoche whispered to young Senator. It was already very impressive that he was able to create a method to break through to the manual level by integrating the methods of the predecessors. After all, creating a new path was the most difficult. Such a person wouldn't be lost in the crowd no matter where he went. If it wasn't for Rinpoche's martial arts, he would probably be able to advance the martial arts on Earth by a huge step. Moreover, he was also very good at fighting. Indeed, he's not bad. Yang Sen nodded. This kind of talent needed to be absorbed into the nation. Even though he asked Rinpoche and the Empress to help look after the others, he himself was here to observe Bai Yuha. However, before absorbing him into the organization, he still had to destroy his arrogance. At this moment, Bai Yuha had beaten the 8th person off the stage, and his self-deprecating look appeared on his face. He originally thought that he was the #1 expert in the world, but he didn't expect that any random person would be at his level. What was the point of fighting? Perhaps even a 10-year-old child would jump out and be as strong as him. Thinking back to his decades of hard work and the ecstasy he felt from every step he took, he thought that this was the scenery of his journey to the peak. Now, looking at it again, it seemed like a joke. It was better to go back to farming. He fought 8 matches and won 8 of them. However, this self-proclaimed #1 expert who had trained hard for decades was the first to despair. Chapter 428. I don't want to fight anymore. Bai Yuha looked at the 9th person who jumped onto the stage with a face full of despair. There was no need to fight anymore. Why? Are you afraid? The 9th person who jumped onto the stage was a woman, and she looked at him coldly. I've made a fool of myself. It turns out that I'm just a frog at the bottom of a well. I'd better return to the mountains. Bai Yuha ignored her and waved his hand at the crowd. Everyone could see his desolation. It was better to return to the mountains to farm. This time, it was better not to go down the mountains. The so-called martial arts were just a joke. Everyone was like this, but he was still complacent and thought that he had reached a level that his predecessors couldn't reach. These 9 people made him completely lose interest. Even if he defeated the 9th person, there would still be the 10th, the 11th, the 100th. In fact, after the first person appeared, there was no longer any value for him to compete. The crowd below didn't have much of a reaction to Bai Yuha's words. This was because, apart from this group of experts trained by the nation, the others were also deeply doubtful. They doubted whether they had lived their entire lives as dogs. When did this world become like this? Their martial arts were even worse than Bai Yuha's, and they were extremely moved when they heard that Bai Yuha had broken through the limits of his predecessors. In particular, the skills that Bai Yuha displayed during the fight were enough to convince them that what he said was true. However, what was going on with these people who jumped onto the stage one after another? Regardless of their moves or experience, the strength and speed that they displayed surpassed them and reached the same level as Bai Yuha. One had to know that they were famous experts in the martial arts world. This time, Bai Yuha invited all the heroes and naturally invited famous people. However, what was going on with those people just now? All of them were experts who surpassed them, and all of them were unknown. Where did they pop out from? Could it be that Bai Yuhe was just a paper tiger? Some people threw away the thought as soon as it popped into their heads. After all, both sides were fighting on the stage, and the people below weren't blind. Not to mention anything else, everyone could see the power and speed of both sides when they fought. The 8 fights on the stage made the people below start to doubt their lives. Could it be that the world was filled with such experts, and they were the only weaklings? Renbaqian looked at Bai Yuhe, who exuded a bleak aura as he walked down the stage and entered the villa without looking back. Renbaqian felt a little sympathy for him. Actually, this person was quite powerful. He was able to advance his cultivation technique by a huge step. This was not something that just anyone could do. What a pity. How's it? Are you interested in giving me some pointers? Yang Sen smiled at Renbaqian. On the surface, it seemed that Renbaqian's skills were similar to those people from before. They were all at the man-will level, and this was easily discovered by the nation. However, Yang Sen had confidence in Renbaqian. After all, Renbaqian had traveled between Earth and the Blessed Enclave. His experience and martial arts were definitely not something these people could compare to. Forget it. Renbaqian shook his head. Even though he had practiced the fist of death, other than being ravaged by little Lolita, he didn't have much experience in fighting. It would be fine if they could use their guns, but it was obvious that they couldn't shoot in the arena. It mattered if have be. It was fine if he couldn't beat someone in that world, but if he was beaten up on Earth, it would be too shameful to expose himself in front of the country. Renbaqian didn't have much confidence in close combat. It was better for him to go back and train hard for 30 to 50 years. By then, these people would have died of old age. Although he was a little cowardly, martial arts had never been his forte. In 2 years, he would have reached the earth-will level. At that time, he would be able to hang them up with one hand. Only a fool would compete with them now. Coward! Someone beside Yang Sen sneered softly. In fact, when Yang Sen and Renbaqian were talking, they had been paying attention and guessing Renbaqian's identity. They were a little dissatisfied when Yang Sen asked him to give them pointers. However, Renbaqian's refusal made them look down on him. Renbaqian tilted his head to take a look. It was a young man in his late 20s who was looking at him provocatively. Renbaqian slowly took out his pistol and pointed it at him. You might die if I punch you. Yang Sen, the rest, that was a gun in his hand. Even an immortal wouldn't be able to escape from a gun fired at such a close range. What did he mean by, I might die if I punch you? How could it be like this? Mr. Ren. Yang Sen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I'm just joking. Renbaqian laughed. What era are we living in? What's the point of practicing martial arts? It's to strengthen the body, not to be brave and ruthless. We are the successors of socialism. What we have to do is to work hard for the 4 modernizations. Fighting and killing is too outrageous. Yang Sen, it seems like you are the only one who kills people's families. How dare you say this? In fact, I have been waiting since I was a child for my motherland to call me as its successor. However, it hasn't happened yet. Renbaqian recalled his many years of waiting and felt somewhat regretful. You will be the prince consort of Dayo in the future. What successor are you talking about? The Empress was originally in a daze. When she suddenly heard Renbaqian talk about successor, she immediately became dissatisfied. I'm just joking. Renbaqian grabbed her hand and squeezed it. The Empress squeezed it back. Renbaqian's hand swelled visibly. Yang Sen was slightly taken aback. The Empress's words revealed a lot of things. Previously, when Renbaqian wanted weapons for war, he already knew that there were countries and wars in the Grotto Heaven world. Furthermore, this Madame Chi should be someone from that country. Renbochin would be a prince consort in the future, which meant that his status in the Grotto Heaven world wouldn't be low. Yang Sen thought about it and felt that this was important news. The higher Renbochin's status in that world, the more valuable he was. Renbochin turned his head and said, "Let's go. I still want to hear about the progress that you told me previously." Seeing that he said this, Yang Sen didn't force him. He informed the people beside him, got up, and left with Renbochin. "Mr. Ren, is your hand all right?" Yang Sen asked when he saw that Renbochin's hand was swollen like a pig's trotter. "It's fine. I'm used to it." Renbochin looked calm. "Wasn't it just a little swollen?" "It was painful, and it wouldn't hurt anymore." When Renbochin followed Yang Sen back, the sky was already dark. He rejected Yang Sen's invitation to have a meal and first went to understand the recent progress in the laboratory. There was a lot of progress. After all, with the help of supercomputers and various modern instruments, the progress of various research projects couldn't be compared to the past. In the past, it would take half a lifetime to calculate, verify, or discover things. Now, it would only take a few days or even a few hours. What caught Renbochin's attention the most were the martial arts manuals and the tests for manual experts. With these manual experts, the progress in the deduction of the martial arts manuals was very fast. The 4 sets of martial arts manuals that Renbochin brought had basically been optimized by the laboratory. The cultivation methods were more reasonable and simple. Of course, this was also related to the fact that the martial arts manuals that Renbochin brought were very simple. These simple martial arts manuals didn't involve many aspects, didn't have great potential, and were easier to modify. After the optimization of the laboratory, these simple martial arts manuals were much stronger than before. If the full score was 5 points, these martial arts manuals were originally 2 points for power, 2 points for cultivation speed, and 2 points for potential. After the optimization, they actually reached 5 points in all aspects, which was a forceful upgrade. Renbochin couldn't help but admire this kind of progress. He even wanted to hand over his Rui visualization. Another thing that Renbochin was concerned about was the discovery of a few new substances in the blood of the manual experts cultivated in the country. One of them was an amine molecule. The laboratory named it polypropylamine, which was distributed in the blood of manual experts. Its biggest function was to transform a portion of the nutrient-carrying molecules in the blood into another substance. Chapter 429. The progress made by the Messier 87 department over the past few months made Renbochin very happy. Although the martial arts in that world were of a high level and had their own cultivation system, they lacked the scientific research on Earth that fundamentally solved all aspects of cultivation. Given more time, when martial arts entered the army, schools, and society, Earth would enter the era of cultivation. That kind of future could be anticipated. Since martial arts already existed, it couldn't be hidden from people. There would be people practicing cultivation techniques everywhere, and the shape of the entire society would definitely change. Everyone would be impacted by this wave of change. There were some good aspects, such as the national football team finally being saved. More likely, it would cause various social problems after people gained power. However, the nation would definitely formulate a comprehensive plan to adapt to the new social form. Renbochin didn't need to consider these things as it was something that the nation needed to consider. He was happy to see such a situation. This world had been peaceful for too long, and such changes would bring about an interesting future. As for whether such a future would have an impact on his and the Empress's current status, he wasn't worried. He was the one who stood at the peak of this era, the one who stood at the tip of the wave. Everything started with him. As for the nation, as long as the Empress advanced to longevity heaven, even if Earth was full of Earth will experts, she would still be a deterrent to everyone. However, there was still a long way to go before Earth will experts could be found everywhere. Currently, the biggest restriction on Earth wasn't only martial arts, but also food and the environment. Unless Earth also had food that was full of vitality like the other world, it would take a long time to reach the Earth will level even if one was talented. After walking around the Messier 87 department, Renbochin took all kinds of information and returned to the villa with the Empress. There was no need to care about Earth for the time being. It would be difficult to reach the level that he wanted to see in a short period of time. As for the information, he had to keep it. The research information on cultivation on Earth was also useful to that world. Perhaps he would talk about scientific cultivation in the future. That sounded good. For the next 2 days, the Empress played with her new phone in the villa. She liked this kind of phone that could be wrapped around her wrist like a watch and could also be used as an electronic watch. Zixiao, what are you playing? Renbochin came over to look at the screen after cooking and found that it was a game. I think it's called Kings of Glory. Just now, when she was fiddling with her phone, she saw the advertisement for Honor of Kings and was suddenly attracted to the characters in the advertisement. It's time to eat. Renbochin smiled. He wasn't worried that the Empress would be tricked by others in the game and want to exterminate her entire clan. This was because the Empress was definitely the one who would set others up. Be prepared to fight 4 against 5 if you're in the same team as her. After dinner, the two of them sat on the sofa and played Honor of Kings. A few minutes later, 3 people thousands of miles away almost smashed their phones. Encountering one bad teammate was bad enough, let alone 2. Under the night sky, the two of them hid in the brightly lit villa and played tricks on each other, which made them feel very happy. After staying on Earth for a few days, the two of them returned to Dayo. Renbochin divided the students into 5 groups, assigned them tasks, and got them to enter Tianjing Basin separately. The so-called tasks were to let them use their own eyes to observe the living conditions and social patterns of the remnant citizens of the Han Nation, understand their thoughts, and think about how to deal with them. They had never learned these things. Renbochin wanted them to seriously understand the parts of this nation that most people didn't understand and think about it for themselves. Regardless of whether what they saw, thought, and got matched up with Renbochin's ideas, this was a very important part of their lives. Running an educational institute to educate people wasn't just about teaching, but also about educating people. Teacher, we are setting off. The next day, everyone bade farewell to Renbochin at the residence. The tasks that Renbochin arranged for them made them somewhat excited. This was the first time that they left their familiar environment to do something that seemed to have a profound meaning. According to what Renbochin said at that time, what they saw and got would affect the future of tens of millions of people. Be careful, Renbochin couldn't help but say as he looked at the familiar young faces in the courtyard. Although these students were at least at the man-will level, there was at least one student in each team who was at the earth-will level. With this kind of strength, they should be able to protect themselves. However, Renbochin was still somewhat worried. After all, these were only half-grown children. The oldest was only 18 years old, and the youngest was only 11 years old. Don't worry. If anyone dares to cause trouble, I will twist his head off and kick it like a ball, Du Laolu said as he patted his chest. Don't let anyone twist your head off, someone immediately said with a laugh. Who dares? Have you seen a big fist? Du Laolu raised his fist and threatened. Trash. Little Lolita looked at him sideways with a face full of contempt. It's better to be careful, Renbochin said faintly. Killing someone doesn't just require a knife. If someone has their eyes on you, they can knock all of you out with a bag of knockout drugs. When that happens, I won't send anyone to save you. I can't afford to lose face. Moreover, even if I wanted to save you, your life and death might not be in your control, and I might not be able to save you. Although Tianjin Basin is also in Dao, it's different from what you know. The people there are more complicated. Yes, I understand. After hearing what Rinpoche said, everyone became much more serious. Let's set off, Rinpoche said with his hands behind his back as he watched the students leave the courtyard with smiles on their faces. I hope they are safe, Rinpoche said softly as he watched them leave. After all, he had taught these students for a few months and had some feelings for them. Rinpoche didn't want them to return with fewer people. Although he arranged for 2 guards to follow behind each team, it might not be foolproof. After another day, Rinpoche bade farewell to the Empress and left the city. This time, Rinpoche didn't bring too many things. He only brought a pistol, a rifle, a few grenades, and Lin Chaola, who was sleeping soundly in the carriage. She should be able to guarantee his safety. After all, the people in Tianjin Basin were all remnant citizens of the Hao Nation. Bringing along Aboriginal guards would more or less attract attention and could easily expose his identity. Rinpoche and Lin Chaola weren't Aboriginals, so it might be less dangerous for the 2 of them to be in Tianjin Basin. However, the biggest problem facing Rinpoche now was how to make the 2 4-corned cows that were pulling the carriage walk in a straight line. Not long after he left the city, he saw these 2 fellows running into the forest at the side. Stop, stop. Rinpoche whipped the 4-corned cows, and they ran even faster. Chapter 430. The ancients had a good saying, the chariot overturned before the victory was achieved, causing the hero to shed tears. Rinpoche felt that this saying was very true. The ancients were very powerful and always made sense. This was the situation he was in now. Before he could even travel 500 meters out of the city, the chariot overturned, and Rinpoche was covered in grass juice. The 2 stupid oxen were still eating grass indifferently. If he didn't have to rely on them as a means of transportation, he would have eaten beef tonight. Lin Chaola climbed out of the chariot with sleepy eyes. She turned her head and looked around before asking in confusion, how did the chariot overturn? Don't talk. Lift the chariot back to the road first, Rinpoche said helplessly. Lin Chaola lifted the chariot with one hand, and Rinpoche dragged the 2 4-corned cows back to the road before continuing. When are we having dinner? You eat when you wake up and sleep when you are full. Why don't you take a look at how fat you are? Rinpoche said disdainfully. That being said, Lin Chaola wasn't fat at all. Not only was she not fat, but she was also very thin and weak. She didn't look like other experts who were full of vigor and heroic. No one could tell that she was actually an expert. It doesn't matter if you're fat. Lin Chaola said indifferently as she rubbed her chest. What are you doing? Rinpoche was amused by her actions. That flat chest of hers was the same regardless of whether she rubbed it or not. Lin Chaola looked down and said confidently, this is called stepping on breasts. I have it in my memory, and it seems to work. You need talent to step on breasts. Without you, what else can you step on? Rinpoche stabbed her in the heart. If I step on it for another 50 years, I will definitely be able to step on it. Lin Chaola wasn't discouraged at all. Rinpoche was speechless. Your way of calculating time might be different from the average person. When are you going to be an adult? Rinpoche felt a headache when he thought about how she was still underage at the age of 40 or 50. This kind of inhuman lifespan was really enviable. It should be about 50 years, a lifespan that made people envious and jealous. If he sent her to the laboratory, he didn't know if she could be developed to extend her lifespan. He would try to get a bottle of blood next time. Not long after the 2 of them walked forward, the road began to descend. After making a turn, they arrived at a winding mountain road. From their current position to the flat ground at the bottom, there was a distance of 700 to 800 meters. In the distance, there was an endless wilderness, a dense forest, and a city within their field of vision. That was today's destination, the first city after entering Tianjin Basin, Longzhou City. Behind Longzhou City was a winding mountain range. It was said that there was an earth dragon in Tianjin Basin that was coiled up. The dragon's head was facing the outside of Tianjin Basin as if it was going to soar into the sky and pounce toward the north. The saying that obtaining Tianjin Basin was equivalent to obtaining the world wasn't unrelated to this earth dragon. Longzhou City was located at the head of this earth dragon. Of course, this was what the Han nation said. The Aboriginals did not pay attention to this. There was a checkpoint at both ends of the winding mountain road. Once these two checkpoints were blocked, more than 10 million remnant citizens of the Han nation would be locked in Tianjin Basin. Ren Baqian took out his clearance token, and the checkpoint was naturally opened. After exiting the checkpoint, there was an endless plain in front of them. A dirt road extended from the checkpoint all the way to the city in the distance, which was almost invisible at this time. At this time, there were many ox carts coming and going on this road. They were caravans going to and fro Goose City, and Ren Baqian and Lin Chalo weren't conspicuous among them. If there was anything worth noticing, it would be that the other carts going from Goose City to Longzhou City were filled with all kinds of goods, while their cart was empty. From the marks left by the wheels and the sound of the ox cart driving on the road, it could be seen that it was empty. Therefore, Ren Baqian didn't try to chat with the merchants next to him as it would be too easy for them to detect something suspicious. Therefore, his attention was focused on the large tracts of farmland on both sides of the road, as well as the farmers who were working in the farmland. Ren Baqian noticed that the farming tools used by the farmers were almost all made of stone with wooden handles attached to the ends. Just like outside, a kitchen knife could be regarded as a family heirloom. Iron farming tools were too extravagant for the Aboriginals and the remnant citizens of the Han nation. The remnant citizens of the Han nation that Ren Baqian met previously were mostly merchants. Even though their statuses weren't high, they weren't considered poor either. However, Ren Baqian could see a lot of things from these farmers. At the very least, the living conditions of these remnant citizens of the Han nation probably weren't very good. Even though these farmers weren't sallow and emaciated, their clothes could be said to be ragged, and their clothes were full of puddings of various sizes. The most important thing was the vitality of these farmers, which gave people the feeling that they were walking corpses and had no vitality at all. Sure enough, you have to see it with your own eyes to know, Ren Baqian said softly. There's a red lollipop in your bag. Give me one. I haven't eaten that before, and I have to eat it with my own mouth to know. Lin Chaola immediately followed up with his words. Be careful of tooth decay. Ren Baqian took out a handful of lollipops from his pocket. Lin Chaola's eyes widened. Here's a red one. Ren Baqian took one out and threw it to Lin Chaola. Stingy. Lin Chaola watched as Ren Baqian put away that handful of lollipops and almost stretched out her claws to scratch him. Lin Chaola carefully tore off the wrapper of the lollipop and neatly folded it before putting it in her pocket. She had been collecting these things recently. By the way, what are you doing here? She finally remembered to ask about the purpose of her visit. I'm here to check on their situation and see how to make them behave, Ren Baqian said as he pointed to the farmers in the farmland. Did they provoke you? I will help you beat them up. Just give me a piece of lollipop for each person I beat up, Lin Chaola said in astonishment. The next time we start a war with Great Xia, can I just let you out? Ren Baqian turned his head to look at this cheap expert and felt like he was closing the door and releasing a dog. I can't beat an army, Lin Chaola immediately replied. If she were to barge into an army, she might not be able to escape. Even though Great Xia couldn't withstand a single blow from the Aboriginals, it was because they had the winged cavalry, which had thousands of earth-will experts. If it was just her, she would probably be torn apart by others. We can only bully the farmers. Is there a need for you? Renbochin squinted his eyes and said with disdain. That's true. Lin Xiaola was still thin-skinned. After thinking about it, she felt that what Renbochin said made sense and didn't mention it again. When it was close to evening, the two of them finally arrived at Longzhou City along the dirt road. While Renbochin was waiting for the inspection, he carefully sized up the guards at the lower city gate. They were dressed in leather armor, were generally thin, and had long swords hanging from their waists. Before coming here, he already knew that these swords were all bone swords. Let's see what's in the carriage. When it was their turn, one of the guards came to open the curtain. When he saw that there was only one box inside, his eyes lit up. Normally, when one returned from Goose City, it would be filled with all kinds of items. Since there was only one box, it meant that the items inside were valuable. His heart immediately lit up. Open the box. Renbochin stuffed a handful of silver fragments into his hand. If it's really opened, you won't be able to get these. The guards of Longzhou City were very greedy. After all, there were only trade caravans coming and going, and there was only one route. Even if those merchants had complaints, they had no choice but to pass through here. Naturally, the guards would unscrupulously plunder the riches. Renbochin already knew about this before coming here, so he wasn't surprised. Renbochin's words made the expression on the guard's face freeze. Just like what Renbochin said, if there were valuable items in the carriage, even if he asked for more money, they wouldn't belong to him. It was better to accept while he was ahead. This handful of silver fragments was equivalent to a month's worth of riches. Chapter 431. Renbochin sat on the ox cart and looked at the buildings and pedestrians on both sides of the road. It was a completely unfamiliar environment, and he felt like he was on a tour. Most of the buildings in Longzhou City were made of wood or pillars. The buildings were dilapidated, and the closer they were to the city gate, the more so. Many children in old clothes or with bare buttocks were running around or biting their dirty fingers while looking at him. Regardless of where one was, rich or poor, children were always full of energy. One could see many more things from the faces of adults. After looking around, Renbochin felt that the ordinary residents weren't doing too well. Whether it was in terms of clothes, complexion, or mental outlook. Their clothes were shabby, and they gave off a numb feeling. They didn't smile much. As he walked deeper into the city, the buildings on both sides of the road were in better condition. There were also some flowers and plants outside the houses on both sides of the road as decorations. Yuelian. Renbochin first saw the word guest and only saw the name of the inn when he got closer. It was indeed worthy of being the largest inn chain in the martial arts world. It had even opened in Dayo, another world. Boss, 2 top-class rooms, Renbochin shouted as he walked into the courtyard. This was how it was played on television. What's a good room? The lady boss in front of the counter raised her head, and the moment she opened her mouth, a strong smell came out of her mouth. She was quite pretty. Although her forehead was a little big, she had curved eyebrows and almond-shaped eyes. She looked like she was in her 30s and looked charming. Top-class room, the best room. Renbochin's face fell as he got off to a bad start. Neo Air, 2 A-class rooms. The lady boss shouted first before smiling at Renbochin and saying, "Customer, your words are quite interesting. Are you from afar?" "Yes, from the Yun nation." Renbochin nodded. This was his identity this time. He and Lin Xiaola didn't look like the remnant citizens of the Hao nation, but more like the people of the Yun nation and Great Xia. "Are you still at war? Was the journey easy?" the lady boss asked. "Yes. The road is not easy, and it took a lot of effort. There's an ox cart outside, and I'll rush into the courtyard first." Renbochin went out to bring the ox cart in. The lady boss leaned against the door and watched his movements. Her eyes flickered, and when she saw how he tied the cow to the stable, she was slightly puzzled. The way they tied the rope didn't seem to be done by the people of the Yun Nation. Instead, it seemed to be done by the Aboriginals. The people of the Yun Nation liked to wear Qingyun buckles, while the Aboriginals wore 3-ring buckles on their mounts. Renbochin watched how the guards tied their mounts to the tree every day. Naturally, he was used to their method and didn't feel that there was anything wrong with it. When Renbochin looked up at her, she smiled again. "Have we arrived?" When he opened the curtain, she groaned and slowly crawled out as if she didn't have any bones. After she came out, she asked Renbochin to carry her suitcase. Then, the two of them were led by the waiter to their rooms. They were 2 adjacent rooms on the 2nd floor. On the way upstairs, the landlady asked lazily, "Is there nothing else in the car? If you lose it, I won't take responsibility." "No more. You've brought very little with you." The room was clean. After all, this was Longzhou City, the first city after entering the basin. There were many merchants coming and going, and the inns were well maintained. "Let's go out for a walk." Renbochin kicked Lin Chaola, who was paralyzed on the bed the moment she entered the room. "Oh!" Renbochin expressionlessly took out a lollipop, waved it in front of her, and then threw it at the door. A gust of wind blew past, and she appeared at the door. Sure enough, lollipops weren't omnipotent, but it was impossible not to have lollipops. Renbochin then opened the suitcase, took out a grenade, put it in his money bag, and hung it on his waist. He heard that there were many pickpockets here. Then, he locked the suitcase and left the room. "Landlady, don't let anyone enter our room," Renbochin said. "Don't worry. If anyone enters, I'll break his claws." Not long after Renbochin left, the landlady went upstairs, opened the door, and entered. She took out a wire and poked it twice in the lock. After opening the suitcase, she saw a pile of bullets, a dozen grenades, a rifle, and a few books. She first picked up the books and flipped through them. She realized that the handwriting on them was unrecognizable. She then carefully looked at the grenades and bullets, and finally put them back into the suitcase before locking it. Renbochin brought Lin Chaola out of the room. With his hands behind his back, he walked toward the center of the city while sizing up the shops on both sides. There were all kinds of cloth shops, salt shops, medicine shops, rice shops, and clothing shops. There were all kinds of things that should be there. People were going in and out of the shops, and it looked very lively. After standing at the side and watching for a while, Renbochin knew what kind of people were going in and out of these shops. Many of them carried a bag or a few bags of things when they came out and placed them on a cart or carried them on a bamboo stick. They didn't look like ordinary people, but more like small vendors in other cities. They bought the things they needed at a low price here and then went to the countryside or small towns to sell them. After walking for a short distance, he smelled a fragrance that filled his nose. He followed the smell and found someone using a stove to roast a fruit that was much bigger than lychees. After roasting for a while, the shell would crack and emit a fragrant smell. "How much is it?" Renbochin asked. 3 for 1 copper coin. Renbochin turned his head to look at Lin Chaola, who was beside him. Her saliva was dripping down her neck and into her clothes. "Give me 30. Renbochin threw over a tael of silver. The shell was very hot. When the shell was peeled off, the golden flesh was revealed. It tasted a little like a coconut. It was a little chewy, but it tasted pretty good. For the rest of the journey, Lin Chaola held bag after bag of snacks and couldn't stop eating. "Get out of the way, get out of the way." The sound of hooves could be heard. A few people in long robes rode on short horses and galloped across the street, causing a little commotion. "Who are they?" Renbochin stood by the side of the road and asked a vendor. "Customer, are you from afar?" "They are from the Nine Blades sect." "Don't provoke them and it will be fine." The vendor laughed. "Galloping on a horse in the city, and no one cares?" Renbochin asked. "Don't talk nonsense. The Nine Blades sect is quite powerful in this area. If someone hears you, be careful not to cause trouble for you," the vendor hurriedly said. "So overbearing." "I didn't say anything. I just wanted to ask if anyone cares about such a situation." Renbochin raised his eyebrows and threw a tael of silver to the vendor. "Please clear up my doubts. We are from another place, and we need to get a feel of the place first so that we don't provoke people we shouldn't provoke. Customer, you will understand after staying for a while. Many of the city guards are disciples of the Nine Blades sect, and there are also many people from the Public Order Bureau. As long as there is nothing wrong, naturally no one cares about them," the vendor said softly as he looked around. Renbochin threw another tael of silver over and heard a lot of information from the vendor. Within the boundaries of Longzhou City, the most powerful force wasn't the prefecture chief who controlled the 5,000 guards, but a sect called the Golden Ring Residents. It was the biggest sect in the area of Longzhou City, Jisei City, and Sanyuanli City. Of course, this Golden Ring Residence was only the biggest force in this area. In fact, Longzhou City belonged to one of the three biggest forces in this basin. As a result, even though the Golden Ring Residence was stronger than the prefecture chief in this area, they didn't dare to provoke the city chief. Of course, the city chief wouldn't provoke them either because the Golden Ring Residence wasn't just one sect. Other than these two forces, there were also two smaller sections. One was the Nine Blades sect, and the other was the Jiangshi sect. In addition, there was a local gang called the Death Toad that controlled a group of local ruffians and thieves. They weren't very powerful, and if they were powerful, the prefecture chief of Longzhou City wouldn't tolerate them. According to the vendor, even this Death Toad wasn't someone outsiders could provoke. When outside, safety came first, and harmony was the most important. No matter who you met, you just had to lower your head and there was no need to cause trouble. Renbochin thanked the vendor for his kindness and continued to walk forward with Lin Chaola. He had a rough idea of the sphere of influence in Longzhou City, but he didn't expect such a small city to have so many different forces. Compared to the area where the Aboriginals were, it was really much more chaotic. "Hey, your money bag has been stolen," Lin Chaola said vaguely as she ate the fruit in her hand. Renbochin touched the money bag at his waist and found that it was indeed gone. "Do you want me to help you snatch it back?" 5 lollipops. Lin Chaola's eyes lit up. "There's no need." Renbochin smiled. They would probably be able to hear the sound of firecrackers in a while. Other people didn't know what the function of a grenade was, but they would definitely pull it when they saw the ring on it. The two of them walked forward for the time it took to drink 2 cups of tea before they heard a loud boom coming from another direction. Chapter 432. In a small alley, more than 10 people were gathered there. The surrounding pedestrians stuck their heads out to take a look, but when they saw the ferocious man glaring at them, they hurriedly lowered their heads and left. "What happened?" A burly man with a full beard and floral embroidery on his body asked in a deep voice. He was wearing a sleeveless jacket and a pleated skirt. Pleated skirts were the traditional clothing of the remnant citizens of the Han nation, regardless of gender. "I don't know, we just arrived too." The others shook their heads. "They only rushed here after hearing the noise." "Who's dead?" The corpses scattered in the alley were no longer recognizable. They were like rags, and some of their limbs were nowhere to be found. "It's Two-Headed Snake. I saw him come in just now," a 15 or 16-year-old youth said from not far away. "He went to the streets to work just now. He should have succeeded, but I don't know how he became like this." The youth looked a little fearful. Although he was young, he had seen many life and death situations. Last month, there was a man about his age who stole from the father of a nine-blades sect disciple. In the end, he was tied to a horse and dragged to death outside the city. He saw it with his own eyes. Logically speaking, he should be used to seeing dead people and shouldn't show such an expression. The reason why he showed such an expression was because he could see clearly that no one had entered the alley. Just now, he secretly followed behind the two-headed snake to see if he had obtained anything good. He didn't expect to hear a thunderous sound coming from inside the alley as soon as he reached the mouth of the alley. Then, he saw the corpse. There was a strange smell in the air. From the beginning to the end, he didn't see anyone else. Subsequently, he told everyone about what he saw. Everyone was puzzled. Since no one else appeared, how did Two-Headed Snake die? Look at the wall, someone suddenly pointed at the wall and shouted. There were many small holes in the surrounding wall. Because of the explosion of the grenade, the wall was slightly damaged. The traces of these fragments entering the wall were not easy to be discovered. Very quickly, everyone dug out some fragments from the wall. However, everyone still couldn't figure out what exactly happened. This was because grenades were beyond their knowledge. Check if there are any suspicious people in the city, the burly man said. They had to figure out what exactly happened first. At this moment, Renbochin was eating noodles. After staying in Dayo for so long, he could finally eat noodles. There was a small restaurant by the street. When he entered, he saw two people eating noodles there. Renbochin pointed in their direction and said, "Give me a portion as well." The noodles were not very delicious. They were sour and spicy, and the taste was a little strange. However, he was satisfied to be able to eat noodles in this place. On the way back, Lin Chaola suddenly stretched out her hand at lightning speed and grabbed the hand of a young man in his 20s. Her eyes were blazing. She could tolerate stealing Renbochin's wallet, but she absolutely couldn't tolerate stealing his bag of sweets. She had been eyeing it for a long time, but he actually dared to stretch his claws out. Ouch, ouch, it's broken. The young man behind Renbochin had a pained look on his face as Lin Chaola grabbed his wrist. His eyes darted left and right as he tried to find a way to escape. He stole from you. Lin Chaola frowned. Although she had caught him, she didn't know how to deal with him. She spent most of her time in Qingxin Palace Hall. The 2 times she came out, she followed Renbochin. Now that she encountered such a situation, she didn't know what to do. Renbochin grabbed the young man's clothes and dragged him into a nearby alley. "How do you think I should deal with you? Should I break your hand or your leg?" Renbochin asked calmly as he pressed the young man against the wall. He wasn't going to cause trouble this time around. He was only going to investigate, but that didn't mean that he could tolerate anything. After stealing a money bag, he still wanted to steal a bag of sweets. Moreover, he even wanted to fleece a sheep. "Do you think I'm easy to bully? In any case, I'm a manual expert. Are you from another place? Let me tell you, I'm from the Death Toad. You'd better let me go, and I definitely won't find trouble with you. Otherwise, we have 800 brothers. No matter how good the 2 of you are, you won't be able to walk out of Longzhou City." The young man rolled his eyes and revealed a ferocious expression. In his line of work, one had to have good eyesight. Otherwise, if he provoked someone he shouldn't provoke, he wouldn't even be able to keep his life. From the moment the 2 of them left the restaurant, he had been watching them. With one look, he could tell that they weren't locals. Outsiders were unfamiliar with this place. Generally, it was better to have one less thing to do. Therefore, the moment he opened his mouth, he scared the 2 of them, 800 brothers. So scary. Renbochin smiled faintly as he held the other party's hand. "This hand is quite beautiful." One look and I can tell that you didn't do much work. There aren't even any calluses. It's rare for a man to have such a hand. Looking at Rinpoche's expression, the young man immediately felt that he was in trouble. Snap! The young man's index finger was pressed against the back of his hand. The young man let out a miserable howl. This looks much more pleasing to the eye. Rinpoche lowered his head and looked at the young man who was bending over and holding his finger as he howled miserably. Next time, watch your eyes more carefully, Rinpoche said and walked out of the alley unhurriedly. That's it. Lin Chala followed beside Rinpoche and asked softly. What else can I do? Rinpoche asked. After all, he wasn't here to stir up trouble. Punishing without teaching is called torture. I saw this in the ancient books. Lin Chala was puzzled. Rinpoche turned his head and looked at her as if she was an alien. Why? Is there something wrong with the ancient books? Lin Chala asked doubtfully. You are right. Rinpoche agreed. Let's go back. He brought Lin Chala back to the vicinity of the alley and happened to see that person walking out. When he saw the two of them, he immediately shuddered. Rinpoche grabbed his chest and pulled him back into the alley. Sir, you're a magnanimous person. Don't lower yourself to my level. The young man was scared out of his wits when he saw the two of them. He quickly begged for mercy and didn't forget to wave his fingers in front of Rinpoche. Do you know what you did wrong? Rinpoche asked. I know, I was blind and offended the two of you. I won't dare to do it again. The young man quickly begged for mercy. If you make a mistake, you'll be punished. If you get beaten, you'll have to stand up straight. It's hard to break an earthen jar without leaving the well. You'll have to pay for what you've done sooner or later. Tell me, of all the things you could have done at your age, why did you come out to steal? If he was caught, wouldn't he be beaten to death if he met a ruthless person? Not everyone is as easy to talk to as me. The young man scowled. Was the person in front of him crazy? He had already left, yet he still came back to teach him a lesson. Moreover, this was breaking one of his fingers. Do you have some misunderstanding about the word easy to talk to? He was either talkative or easy to talk to. Can you let me go and let me go to the medicine shop to take a look at my finger? I still have to rely on this finger to eat. Are you convinced by what I said? Rinpoche's saliva flew all over the place before he finally asked this question. I accept. I will turn over a new leaf when I go back, the young man scowled. Come, let me take a look at your finger. This one is broken. How did it become like this? It's not symmetrical. Rinpoche grabbed the young man's hand, and the young man suddenly trembled in fear. Crack. Along with the crisp sound of bones breaking, the middle finger was also attached to the back of his hand. Punishing without teaching is called abuse. I taught without punishing and spared your life. Rinpoche let go of the young man, feeling very satisfied. Teaching without punishing means that evil people won't be punished. Lin Chala added. The young man's face turned green when he heard this. Must the two of you kill me? How could this little girl be so ruthless? Forget it. It's fine as long as you taught him. Let's not kill him. He's just trying to make a living. Who would do this if they could do something else? It's not easy for him. Rinpoche looked kind. Oh. Lin Chala nodded. After the two of them left, the young man looked at his two fingers that were attached to the back of his hand with a pale face. Madhav***, I met a lunatic. I wonder if these two fingers can be reattached. The young man's hands were wrapped in cloth as he dragged his legs home. He was really unlucky today and didn't know if he could take revenge. Street crossing rat, how did you end up like this? Not long after he returned to his shabby house, a young man came looking for him. Don't mention it. When this matter was brought up, he was covered in snot and tears. Although it was common for him to be beaten up when he was caught as a thief, today's incident made him feel aggrieved. Were these two crazy people? Did you see any strange people in the city? That person asked when he saw that the young man didn't want to talk about it. Half Mountain Flower instructed us to report any suspicious or strange strangers. Half Mountain Flower was the boss of this area and was in charge of more than 20 pickpockets. Street Crossing Rat's eyes lit up when he heard this. Weren't these two strangers today? Furthermore, they were two crazy people. He could finally take revenge. One had to know that Half Mountain Flower was a man-will expert, and his leader was even an earth-will expert. Although these two people had some martial arts, at their age, how good could their martial arts be? He didn't believe that they would be able to get away with their leader. In his heart, an earth-will expert was already the most powerful person. He could even go to a brothel with two little girls, one in front and the other pushing him from the back. Also, that little girl was so beautiful, but her heart was actually so ruthless. He didn't know how the leader would deal with her. Chapter 433. At night, at the Uli Inn. His son was preparing to close for the day. Although the city gates were open all night, there was basically no one around at this time. When he closed the door and turned around, he felt that his eyes were blurry and quickly rubbed them. There was clearly no one in the lobby just now, but now there was a burly man standing in front of the counter. "Be Sting, are there any suspicious strangers?" The burly man had a square face, thick eyebrows, and big eyes. He was considered dignified and tall. Although he was not as tall as the Aboriginals, he was slightly taller than the ordinary remnant citizens of the How Nation. "Hey, if it isn't Owner Lin. Why are you here today?" The lady boss saw the man in front of her and immediately put on a smile. At the same time, she was thinking, is this fellow looking for strangers? Who is he looking for? The two people upstairs. No matter where there was light, there would be darkness. There would always be places where light couldn't reach. There was only one underground force in Longsho City, the Death Toad. The man in front of her was called Lin Yuan, the deputy chief of the Death Toad. It was said that he was much more powerful than the chief. However, his life had been saved by the chief, and he had always been the deputy. Even though he was more powerful than the Death Toad, he had not been disloyal and was considered a trustworthy person. In Longsho City, he could be considered a well-known figure. Although the Death Toad gang had gathered a group of ruffians, which made people look down on them, the Death Toad and Lin Yuan's martial arts were solid. Even the Nine Blades sect would not provoke them. "I'll leave after asking a few questions. You, Be Sting, are really free and unfettered in such a place. I'm afraid that the people below don't understand etiquette, so I came to ask them personally," Lin Yuan said in a deep voice. "Oh. It can't be a small matter to trouble Owner Lin, right? I don't know why you're making such a fuss," the lady boss said softly as she leaned against the counter. "Just tell me if there are any." "A man and a woman, and they are both young," Lin Yuan said in a deep voice. "You know my rules." The lady boss glanced at the second floor and rolled her eyes. "I understand. Thank you." Lin Yuan cupped his fists. He understood what Be Sting meant. Her rules were that no one could cause trouble in the store. No one could touch her customers in the store. What's his background? Lin Yuan lowered his voice. "If you can make me feel that you're stronger than that dead man of mine, I'll tell you everything." The lady boss moved her body and sat on the bar counter. She placed a hand on Lin Yuan's shoulder and said softly. Lin Yuan took a step back and said, "You must be joking. Be Needle, Jade Knife, I can't afford to provoke the two of you." Are you looking down on me because I'm getting old? The lady boss said faintly, her eyes moving about, seducing one's soul. Lin Yuan's heart skipped a beat, but he quickly suppressed it. The green snake's mouth, the wasp's stinger. From the name of the flower, one could tell who she was. Those who wanted to get intimate with her but ended up losing their lives were like carps crossing the river. It was said that a young master from a city lord's family in the north had died. He had been skinned alive. His skin had been peeled off, stuffed with straw, and the meat had been made into buns. After that, she was exposed, so she had no choice but to escape here. After she escaped, it was said that dozens of puppets made of human skin stuffed with straw were found. Therefore, she also had a flower name, Pai Wang. Look at your guts. The lady boss stretched out her finger and drew a circle in front of him. Although I'm gutsy, I know what I can touch and what I can't. Lin Yuan squeezed out a smile. The lady boss grabbed his clothes and pulled him in front of her. She blew into his ear and whispered, "They said they are merchants from the Yun nation. However, I didn't see any goods, thank you." Lin Yuan quickly took a few steps back, cupped his hands at her, and disappeared into the night. The lady boss looked at his disappearing figure and sneered. It would be a good thing if someone could help her find out what was going on. Ren Baqin naturally didn't know that he had been targeted as soon as he arrived in Longzhou City. Furthermore, it wasn't just one group of people. Previously, he had repeatedly exhorted the students not to get into trouble. He didn't expect that nothing would happen to the students, but he himself would be targeted. The night passed. The next morning, when he opened the door, a fragrant body threw itself into his arms. Ah! A soft and seductive cry of surprise sounded. Ren Baqin quickly raised his hands to block the other party and grabbed a couple of handfuls. It felt pretty good. Are you alright? Ren Baqin pretended that he didn't notice anything as he helped the lady who threw herself into his arms. I wanted to ask if you wanted breakfast. I didn't expect to slip and bump into you. The lady boss's face was flushed, and she pushed her chest forward. When she stood up, she gently brushed her hands over Ren Baqin's body. Ren Baqin savored the feeling, and his expression didn't change at all. It's good that you're alright. Prepare breakfast for 2 more. After sending the lady boss off, Ren Baqin squinted his eyes. It was such a coincidence that she bumped into him as soon as he opened the door. Longzhou City wasn't big, but there were many demons and monsters. It was much more interesting to come out than to stay in the palace. There was more of a Jianghu flavor. Staying in the palace or beside the Empress wasn't as exciting. The Jianghu was a place that all men yearned for. It was full of coquettish young married women, unmarried heroines, and cross-dressing beggars. As his mind wandered, he walked to the room next door and pushed the door open. Lin Chaola was sprawled out on the bed, drooling. She was wearing a thin white tube top and shorts that were almost sticking to her body. Ren Baqin confirmed that her flat figure wasn't as developed as his chest muscles. This was such a sad story. Wake up, the sun is shining on your butt. Ren Baqin stood by the bed and shouted. There was no response. It's time to eat. Oh, where? Lin Chaola immediately sat up with hazy eyes. Put on your clothes, let's go downstairs to eat. After eating, Ren Baqin put 2 grenades in his pocket and continued to walk around with Lin Chaola. Along the way, he bought a money bag, stuffed a grenade into it, and hung the money bag on his waist. The two of them walked around for the whole morning, from the north to the south of the city. Along the way, they inquired about their group of students. After all, with so many Aboriginal youths, it was quite conspicuous and easy to find out about them. When he entered the city yesterday, they were still in the city and had only left the city this morning. At the same time, 5 disciples of the 9-Blade sect rode into the city ostentatiously on short horses. Let's drink and rest first. We will go to work in the afternoon, one of the youths said to everyone. One of the young men said to the crowd. Everyone immediately responded and shouted, Xiaoyuan, you should be the one paying for this drink. No problem. That youth smiled and led everyone into a restaurant by the roadside. After everyone had eaten and drunk their fill, the youth brushed past someone as he walked down the stairs. There was a slip of paper in his hand. He took a glance at the note when no one was paying attention and immediately understood. Not long after Renbaqian and Lin Chaola left the restaurant, they saw the crowd in front of them becoming a little chaotic as they moved to both sides. There was the sound of hurried hooves as 5 disciples of the Nine-Blade sect galloped along the road while shouting, Make way, make way. Renbaqian and Lin Chaola stood by the roadside indifferently and waited for the horses to pass. He didn't expect one of the horses to charge toward them. The youth on the horse shouted, The horse is out of control. Make way, make way. Chapter 434. He did it on purpose, Lin Chaola replied quickly. Renbaqian felt that something was amiss even without Lin Chaola's reminder. It was too much of a coincidence that so many people were charging at them, just like in the morning. Kill the horse and leave the person behind. While they were talking, the horse was only 3 meters away from Renbaqian. Renbaqian could feel the wind from the galloping horse on his face. A small figure appeared in front of Renbaqian, raised its paw, and slapped at the horse. The surrounding people immediately exclaimed. Although the dwarf horse wasn't tall, it was strong and could kill a person. Lin Chaola, who was in front of Renbaqian, looked thin and weak. It was as if a gust of wind could blow her away, let alone being hit by a horse. Everyone could almost see the scene of her being hit by the horse. Thump. As Lin Chaola slapped the horse's head with her delicate palm, the horse fell to the ground as if it had hit a wall. The person on the horse also flew into the air and barely managed to twist his body in mid-air before falling into the shop next door. When the other riders saw the situation, they immediately surrounded the shop. One of them shouted toward the shop, Xiaoyuan. Is something the matter? After realizing that the horse was dead, someone shouted angrily at Lin Chaola, although it's Yuan's fault for losing control of the horse, don't you think you've gone too far? They clearly saw how Lin Chaola killed the horse with one slap. To kill a galloping horse with one slap, one needed to be at least at the manual level. However, to make the galloping horse stop moving as if it had hit a wall without moving at all was something that even their master couldn't do. Although this horse was a dwarf horse, it weighed 250 kilograms. Coupled with the impact of the galloping horse, even an intermediate manual expert couldn't remain motionless. This girl, who looked much younger than them, was actually so highly skilled. This made them speak more politely to her. However, they weren't alone. There was still the Nine-Blade sect behind them, so they had to demand an explanation no matter what. He was the one who hit me. After hearing her reply, Renbaqian raised his head and said faintly, My servant girl was afraid that he would hit me, so she used a little more force. You are the servant girl. You are the servant girl. Lin Chaola was immediately unhappy when she heard that. If I'm not a servant girl, then what am I? Renbaqian asked. Bodyguard. Lin Chaola was very firm about her identity. A maid or a bodyguard? Renbaqian held a lollipop in his hand. Lin Chaola hesitated for a moment, but she still didn't give in. Bodyguard. There was another one in Renbaqian's hands. Servant girl it is. Lin Chaola smiled and grabbed the lollipop. The rest of the people watched him coax the child with a lollipop. It was hard to imagine that this girl, who could be easily bribed, was actually so skilled. Sir, although I'm also at fault in this matter, don't you think you're going a little overboard? With your skills, you clearly could have dodged it, yet you wanted to kill my horse. Isn't this inexcusable? We are disciples of the Nine-Blade sect. Although we aren't a big sect, we can't let people bully us like this, the young man named Xiaoyuan said as he walked out of the shop with a dejected expression. Speaking of which, I still want to ask you. Why did it have to bump into us on such a wide road? Renbochin squinted his eyes and looked over. Naturally, the horse went out of control. This isn't something I can control. Otherwise, this wouldn't have happened. The young man's eyes flickered. What a coincidence. Renbochin laughed mischievously. Why don't the two of you leave your names? It will be easier for us to explain today's incident when we return. After all, horses are precious. This horse belongs to the sect and is very valuable, the young man said. Names? Even if I tell you, you won't know. We are not from here and are not here to cause trouble. This thing is for you as compensation. Renbochin took out a dark green ball and threw it to the young man. What's this? The young man took it and looked at it carefully. It was a dark green ball with a raised lattice, a ring, and a metal strip. Good stuff. Its value is much higher than your horse's. As for its use, I can't tell you. After all, this thing isn't something you should have. Renbochin laughed, ignored them, and left with Lin Chaola. Seniors, let them go. The young man held the ball in his hand and said. That horse. One of them was somewhat unwilling. After all, a dwarf horse was considered precious to them. If they let them go just like that, they wouldn't be able to explain themselves when they returned. The five of them only had enough pocket money to buy one horse for a year. He's an expert. Go back and tell Master about this matter. I believe he won't blame us. After all, the horse that I was riding on went out of control. If there's any responsibility, I will bear it alone. There's no need to trouble senior brothers. The young man squeezed out a smile. After hearing what he said, everyone stopped talking. However, they were somewhat embarrassed. After all, they were from the same sect. What did he give you? Someone asked curiously. This ball looks quite exquisite. I wonder what it's used for. What's this metal strip? It looks like it's holding a handle. There's a ring. Pull it and see. Maybe it can open. The few of them gathered around to look at the ball that Renbochin gave them. After all, even a bodyguard was such an expert. She was so young and pretty, although a little flat. Presumably, the identity of such a person wasn't ordinary. What he gave them wouldn't be ordinary either. Did you pull the ring down? Did you damage it? Let's see if we can open it. Maybe there's something inside. Boom! Hearing the explosion coming from behind, Renbochin couldn't help but say, curiosity killed the cat. What did you give them? Lin Chaola couldn't help but ask. If there were guards here, they would definitely know what Renbochin gave them. However, she had been sleeping in the city and naturally didn't recognize a grenade. It's just a small thing. Punishing without teaching is torture. Lin Chaola reiterated. There's no chance to punish them even if I wanted to, Renbochin replied. Then, he thought for a while and said. It seems like we're being targeted. Forget it. We have a rough idea of the situation here. Now that something like this has happened, we can't stay here anymore. Let's go to other cities to take a look. After all, it was an entrance city. It was too close to Goose City and couldn't come into contact with too many things. If he wanted to see more, he had to go deeper. Sir, why are you in such a hurry to leave? If we set off now, I'm afraid we will have to spend the night on the road. When the lady boss heard that Renbochin wanted to check out, she was a little surprised. She didn't know what he had encountered outside. The public security here isn't very good. It's not suitable for me to stay. Ren Bachin smiled. How can that be? The lady boss was even more surprised. Longzhou City's public security is famous. After all, there are so many merchants coming and going. If the public security wasn't good, there would have been chaos. Maybe the public security here has worsened after I came here, Ren Bachin thought to himself, but didn't say it out loud. An hour later, the two of them sat in an ox cart and left the south gate. It's confirmed that it's him. Should we chase after him? A few people stood at the city gate and looked at the ox cart in front. Everyone else looked at the two people in front. Brother Lin, what do you think? The man at the front asked. There's no need to provoke him. That girl is at least an earth will expert. With such skills at such a young age, her background isn't simple, Lin Yuan said in a deep voice. It wasn't wise to provoke such a person just because of a subordinate's interference. Furthermore, even if we don't chase after him, the Nine-Blade sect won't let this matter rest, Lin Yuan added. Speaking of this matter, the man at the side felt a little distressed. After all, it wasn't easy to send a disciple into the Nine-Blade sect. After so many years, he had only sent 2 disciples in, and now, one of them had died. Let's wait for the Nine-Blade sect to catch up and see what happens, the man at the front said. After all, this is Tianjing Basin, not the Yun Nation. These 2 guys were so ostentatious and injured someone. Yet, they still want to leave. They are looking down on us. Lin Yuan remained silent. Looking up to him and looking down on him. That was a lie. The man in front was probably thinking about the Nine-Blade sect. After all, with such skills at such a young age, he definitely wasn't an ordinary person. He probably had a family or sect behind him. If they died here, the Nine-Blade sect would probably be the first place the other party would look for. The Nine-Blade sect had become more and more overbearing in recent years. It would be reassuring if 2 of those old fellows from the Nine-Blade sect died. Just for this reason alone, it was worth interfering. Chapter 435. It was already afternoon when they left the city. They didn't walk too far before the sky turned dark. It wasn't easy for him to find a forest. He parked the ox cart by the roadside and came back with some firewood. The roars of wild beasts could be heard in the forest. From time to time, they could also hear some rustling in the underbrush, but they couldn't see anything. There are only steamed buns left. Ren Bachin took out some steamed buns from the carriage. These were taken from the hotel. After all, they were in a hurry to leave, and it was good enough to have steamed buns to eat. Ren Bachin sprinkled some salt and chili on the steamed buns until they were slightly charred. The taste was pretty good. A spicy sauce would be even better. After eating the steamed buns, the 2 of them lay on the grass and looked up at the sky, the mosquitoes buzzing in their ears. Slap! Ren Bachin gave himself a slap and perished together with a large mosquito. Why is it only me? Ren Bachin felt that something was amiss. Lin Chalo wasn't affected at all, but those mosquitoes were moving toward him. Who? Ren Bachin turned his head to look and saw a mosquito land on her face. Its proboscis pierced into her face, but it was as if it had pierced into a steel plate. The moment it came into contact with her face, the proboscis broke, and the remaining mosquito flew into the air with an aggrieved look on its face. His skin was so thick that it made others envious and jealous. Ren Bachin sighed and continued to lie there and look at the sky. The night sky of this world was filled with stars and was extremely beautiful. On Earth, he could see the beautiful night sky when he was young, but he couldn't see it anymore after he grew up. The dark sky hangs low accompanied by a sea of bright stars. The insects fly. The insects are flying. Ren Bachin smacked his lips and couldn't continue singing. He was already a mosquito. Mosquitoes fly, the sound of horses galloping in the distance broke the silence of the night. Renbochin felt that he might have something to do if he traveled at night on a fast horse. In the afternoon, he knew that someone would definitely chase after him, but it was a little slower than he expected. "Wake up, there's work to do." "I'll do it when I wake up," Lin Chaola said in a daze. "I can wait, but they probably can't." While the two of them were talking, the sound of horse hooves got closer. There were at least 6 or 7 horses. "There's fire. There's someone in front. Based on the route, it's most likely them. Be careful." The few people on horseback saw the fire in the distance and immediately became spirited. They hurried and finally caught up. The other party had actually killed a few disciples of the Nine Blades sect in Longzhou City. No matter what, they could not let him off. The sound of the horses' hooves stopped outside the range of the firelight. In the dark, they saw 2 people lying not far from the bonfire and immediately knew that they had found their targets. "Sirs, I don't know how my Nine Blades sect's disciples offended the 2 of you for you to use such a vicious method. Out of 5 of them, only 1 survived. Furthermore, he was seriously injured. In the future, even if he were to be cured, he would be crippled. Aren't the methods of the 2 of you too vicious? Do you think you can just leave after killing someone?" 6 people walked out of the dark night. The first 2 were in their 50s or 60s, while the other 4 were in their 30s or 40s. They all had a capable aura about them. "They are too ugly," Renbochin said without hesitation. Although the other party had provoked him first, the Nine Blades sect was just a small sect in Renbochin's eyes. On the other hand, he was a member of the palace and was a secondary class, rank 4 official. If he wasn't out on a mission this time, he could simply transfer a team of guards to destroy the entire Nine Blades sect. With such a huge gap, he naturally couldn't be bothered to explain to the people of the Nine Blades sect. Furthermore, there was no need to explain. Was he supposed to say that the other party had deliberately offended him and reason with them? Renbochin couldn't be bothered to do such a thing. The people of the Nine Blades sect had come with anger. The reason why they didn't make a move was because they saw the corpse of the horse and knew that the girl was an expert. Upon hearing Renbochin's words, they were even more furious. If they let the 2 of them go, the Nine Blades sect would no longer be able to show its face in the future. "Since you said so, there's no need to say anything more. Capture them and wait for the sect master to deal with them." One of them laughed angrily and didn't say anything else. He leaped into the air and pounced toward the 2 people. The others also surrounded them. Renbochin lay on the ground, held his pistol, and fired 3 consecutive shots at the figure in the air. After 3 consecutive gunshots, the person changed his position in the air and shouted, "Trying to hurt me with mere concealed weapons. You are looking down on the Nine Blades sect." Along with this voice, a lotus flower formed by snow-white blade gleams bloomed in the air. When the person in the air saw that the 2 of them did not move, he relaxed. He thought to himself that the 2 of them were still young and had not seen much of the world. That young girl could kill a horse and was quite strong. However, when faced with a life-and-death battle, she was stunned. After capturing the 2 of them, he wanted to let them know that this was Tianjing Basin, not the Yun Nation. Not everyone could be arrogant and despotic here. The lives of those disciples would be repaid by the 2 of them with their lives. That girl would first pose in 18 positions to satisfy her craving before killing them to pay with her life. The eyes of the people surrounding them lit up when they saw the snow-white lotus flower in the air. This move was called Seventh Blade. The Nine Blades sect's name wasn't because of the 9 blades, but because of the 9 moves. Each move was extremely powerful, and the later the moves, the more powerful they were. No one had mastered 9th Blade for many years, and only the sect leader had mastered 8th Blade. This move was the strongest move after Seventh Blade. This elder used the strongest move from the start, and it was obvious that he was determined to win. Just as all kinds of thoughts were running through everyone's minds, a figure suddenly bounced up from the ground and rushed in front of him at a faster speed. The body twisted a few times in the air and passed through the saber light. Before he could react, a claw slashed at his face, and then another. That person's face was covered with 10 bloody marks, and his entire face was beyond recognition. He screamed and fell from the air. This unforeseen event shocked the people surrounding them. One had to know that the person who fell was an intermediate earth will expert, yet he was actually defeated in one round. Spirit wheel. A hoarse voice with a slight tremble could be heard. Everyone was shocked. Spirit will expert. One had to know that a spirit will expert was definitely an expert among experts no matter where he was. If he were to become an official in Great Xia, he would at least be a rank 4 official. Most of the practitioners had probably never seen a spirit will expert in their entire lives. Now, this little girl was actually a spirit will expert. They were actually going to make a move against a spirit will expert. Thinking about what they were about to do, everyone suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. There was nothing worse than being an enemy of a spirit will expert. If there was, it would be what they were preparing to do. They were preparing to make a move against a spirit will expert. It was simply putting their necks on the edge of a knife. No one doubted the words of that voice because it belonged to another elder who was also an earth will expert. This time, the Nine Blades sect had sent 2 earth will experts to capture the 2 of them. One had to know that the Nine Blades sect only had a total of 5 earth will experts and was already the largest sect in Longzhou City. Earth will experts could already do whatever they wanted in most places. However, they didn't expect to encounter an even more tyrannical person this time. She was actually a spirit will expert. Lin Chaola landed on the ground, licked her paws, and frowned. It seemed that the taste of blood wasn't that good. Be careful of diarrhea. Renbachchen saw her actions and couldn't help but say, "Don't you find it dirty to lick the blood of any Tom, Dick, or Harry?" Lin Chaola immediately rubbed her paws on her body. If they were previously judged as a Tom, Dick, or Harry, the people from the Nine Blades sect would definitely fight to the death with the other party. However, after knowing that the other party was a spirit will expert, all these thoughts disappeared. Now, they were thinking about how to leave this place alive. Chapter 436. How should we deal with them? Lin Chaola wiped the blood off her claws, ignored them, and turned to look at Renbachchen. Renbachchen looked at the people around him. It was as if they were frozen in place and didn't dare to move. The man on the ground also stopped screaming for fear that his voice would attract Lin Chaola's attention. With just one move, Lin Chaola had only used one move, and the few people who had come with a menacing aura were trembling like quails, not daring to move at all. Everyone felt a chill in their hearts when they heard Lin Chaola's words. They were afraid that the man would say, "Kill them." In the face of a spirit will expert, they didn't even have the chance to escape. There was no need to make a move. Just the title of a spirit will expert was enough to frighten them. "Sir, if there's anything I can do for you, I'll be at your beck and call." "I'll definitely do it properly," a man suddenly said. "Leave this one. As for the others..." Renbachchen pointed at the man and muttered to himself. The first person who spoke was pretty good and had quick reflexes. Renbachchen was indeed lacking someone to follow him around. It didn't matter to him whether the others were killed or not. As long as most of the commoners were left behind, he didn't care about the lives of these practitioners. After he finished speaking, the first person immediately heaved a sigh of relief. "The night is long, and I'm not in the mood to sleep. Let's play rock paper scissors. Those who win can leave, and those who lose. The scenery here isn't bad, and it's a good place to be buried. There are mountains on one side and water on the other, so you won't be lonely in the future, Renbochin said after a slight pause. Upon hearing this, everyone felt a chill in their hearts. Not only did they encounter a spirit wool expert, but there was also a person who didn't follow common sense and acted based on his preferences. No matter who it was, they were afraid of meeting such a person who didn't follow common sense, especially when there was a spirit wool expert by his side. "Sir, we were blind. Please let us live. As long as you have any instructions in the future, we won't say a word," another earth wool expert said while suppressing his fear. At the same time, he cursed his dead disciples. If it weren't for them, he wouldn't have encountered such a situation. "Please let us go. We were blind." The others also begged for mercy. "I didn't want to cause trouble, but you guys chased after me. Don't blame me. I've already given you a chance." Renbochin was halfway through his sentence when a gust of wind blew past him. Lin Chaola was gone. Renbochin looked at the empty spot next to Lin Chaola, who was originally standing beside him. Then, he looked at the few man-wool experts and 2 earth-wool experts around him and felt that he had been F***ed. That simple-minded person actually abandoned her and disappeared. Moreover, he had thrown himself into the crowd and disappeared, surrounded by enemies. Renbochin's expression did not change in the slightest. It was precisely at this moment that he couldn't panic, reveal his cowardice, and let the other party see through him. Sneaking a glance at the few people opposite him, he saw the eyes of the person who had just spoken start to emit an ominous glint. That person was also one of the 2 earth wool experts. The others were also getting restless, but they didn't want to capture him. Instead, they wanted to escape. Just now, Renbochin was still thinking about how to deal with them. In the blink of an eye, the situation had changed, and that spirit wool expert had actually disappeared. How could others not be tempted by such an opportunity? The only thing that made everyone hesitate was what was going on right now. Where did that spirit wool expert go? If he ran away and was caught, his fate would be even worse. Or should they capture the person in front of them? Just as everyone was hesitating, Renbochin faintly said, "A person can be weak and have low martial arts skills, but he must have a good brain. Your martial arts skills are low, and your brains aren't good either. It hasn't been easy for you to survive until now. However, if you want to continue living, you won't live for long even if I don't kill you." Renbochin's brain worked rapidly as he spoke. At this moment, whether or not he could delay the few people opposite him depended on his eloquence. If the other party saw that he was guilty, they would probably make a move immediately. By the time Lin Chaola returned, he would have already fallen into their hands. At that time, his life and death would no longer be in his hands. However, he couldn't force them too harshly. Otherwise, they would immediately take the risk out of desperation, and he would be unlucky. The only thing he could rely on now was that the other party didn't know his actual strength. He had to use his words to stall for time. "Sir, what do you mean by this?" Everyone's attention was immediately attracted by Renbochin's words. The 2 earth wool experts, who were originally ready to make a move, were shocked when they heard this. "Dayo is currently at war, yet you guys are still restless. As far as I know, Dayo can no longer tolerate you guys and is preparing to bathe Tianjing Basin in blood. All of you, including your families, must die. However, you guys still don't know it." Renbochin sneered. Renbochin's words shocked everyone again. Even the 2 earth wool experts couldn't care less about anything else. Even though the remnant citizens of the Han Nation and the Aboriginals were in the same nation, they were like fire and water. It wouldn't be a day or 2 before the remnant citizens of the Han Nation wanted to leave this basin. Everyone knew after birth that the vast land outside belonged to them in the past, but now, they could only hide in this basin. Under such circumstances, the remnant citizens of the Hound Nation naturally had many tricks up their sleeves. Shiwanya, the Protectorate of the South, would seize the slightest hint of this situation and kill everyone. This made even more people resentful, and some people were worried that the Aboriginals would come in one day and kill everyone. Under such worries, they wanted to leave this basin even more and control their lives in their own hands. At this moment, when they heard Rinpoche say what they were most worried about, everyone couldn't care less about anything else. "How did Sir know?" an Earthwill expert hurriedly asked. Right now, he couldn't care less about the other party and escape. One had to know that Rinpoche's words involved all the people in Tianjin Basin, even if they had families. "That's why I'm here," Rinpoche said faintly. Everyone wanted to ask more questions, but a figure suddenly appeared among them. Lin Chala was standing there, carrying two people in her hands. Seeing that Lin Chala had returned, Rinpoche heaved a sigh of relief. Even though it had only been 2 minutes, it was enough for him to die several times over. However, now wasn't the time to talk about this. "Who is this?" They were peeping in the forest just now. Lin Chala threw the two people to the ground. Their faces were scratched one after another. Lin Chala raised her head and looked at Rinpoche with hopeful eyes, as if she was asking for credit and a reward. Rinpoche was exasperated that she didn't live up to his expectations. She threw him aside and ran to catch people. "You have to remember your identity. You are a bodyguard, a bodyguard, a bodyguard." If there weren't outsiders around, he would have taught her what a bodyguard was. "Dead toad. Lin Yuan." Those people from the Nine Blades sect exclaimed when they saw the two of them. "You can even recognize this." Rinpoche looked down and saw that the two people were beyond recognition. Why did Lin Chala love scratching people's faces so much? Chapter 437. Death Toad. Is it that gang from Longzhou City? Rinpoche had heard of the Death Toad when he was in Longzhou City, so he immediately thought of it when he heard the name. He didn't know why these two people followed him here. Yes, these two are the chief and deputy chief of the Death Toad. "Sir, what you said just now was a lie, right?" a trembling voice asked. Normally, the people from the Nine Blades sect would definitely want to know why these two people were following them. However, they were more concerned about what Rinpoche said just now. One had to know that what Rinpoche said just now was simply too important to them. If Dayo really wanted to use their troops in Tianjin Basin, they were afraid that blood would flow in this cage eventually. Other than a few experts who could escape by climbing over the surrounding mountains and cliffs, the rest had nowhere to run. Now, they only hoped that Rinpoche was lying to them and completely threw aside the fact that Rinpoche wanted to take their lives just now. "Lie to you? Is there a need for me to do that?" Rinpoche sneered. Tianjin Basin was now like psoriasis to Dayo. If one day, the Empress no longer cared about the original agreement and wanted to slaughter these remnant citizens of the Hao Nation, he reckoned that the entire imperial court would raise their hands in approval. Dayo had never learned how to appease people, and it had never been a country that paid attention to etiquette and benevolence. To them, killing was the most convenient thing. Hearing what Rinpoche said, the people from the Nine Blades sect were speechless and had an ugly look on their faces. "Sir, you are here for..." Just now, Rinpoche had said that he was here for this matter. Furthermore, with a spirit-will expert by his side, it increased the persuasiveness of his words. "I am here for this matter. Consider it as giving you a chance to live," Rinpoche said faintly. If he didn't make this trip, the lives of these remnant citizens of the Hao Nation would depend on the Empress's mood. However, in his eyes, these remnant citizens of the Hao Nation were still somewhat useful. After all, the Aboriginals were too boorish, and their brains were filled with muscles. A country couldn't only know how to fight wars. If he wanted to use some other people, these remnant citizens of the Hound Nation would be a better choice. After all, even if the Yun Nation was conquered in the future, the resistance of the people of the Yun Nation that had just been conquered would probably be even more intense. In contrast, these remnant citizens of the Hound Nation had been under the rule of Deo for so many years, and the rule of the Aboriginals was deeply ingrained in their bones. This could be seen from the fact that they only dared to make small moves in private and didn't dare to rise up in revolt. Therefore, these remnant citizens of the Hound Nation were more useful. Originally, the life and death of these people didn't matter to him, but after seeing their reactions after listening to his words, he changed his mind. It would be better to reveal his identity and make those who were obedient stay behind. With them at his beck and call, he would be able to avoid a lot of trouble during his trip to Tianjin Basin. At the very least, there wouldn't be another incident like what happened in Longzhou City. If they did well, it would be fine to keep them. In any case, he would definitely need people. So it turns out that Milord has come for this matter. We were rash before, I hope Milord does not take offense. Ren Baqian nodded slightly. These words were pleasing to the ears. On account of your tactful behavior, Ren Baqian said halfway through his sentence, but everyone understood what he was implying. I was indeed rash. It turns out that we are a family. Ren Baqian. Who's a family with you? Don't you have any shame? The Empress and I are a family. Milord, even if we want to resist, we don't have enough weapons. Currently, Tianjin Basin is filled with bone knives. Back then, when we came here, the knives and spears were melted down and reforged into kitchen knives. Now, most people here use bone knives. Although they can be sharpened, the Aboriginals are strong and heavy. Furthermore, they are wielding steel knives. After a few collisions, the bone knives will break. Therefore, we have always been powerless to resist. Is Milord here with the intention of helping us? Ren Baqian. Did this group of people misunderstand something? Are you asking me for weapons to rebel? May I know which family in the Yun Nation you are from? Or are you sent by the imperial court? Ren Baqian, someone from Great Xia came a month ago and is currently in the valley. At that time, he said that the Yun Nation would definitely help us. Now that Milord is here, there is such a misunderstanding. If we have Milord's help, our chances of success will be much higher. There are only 3 spirit will experts in the Protectorate of the South. With the spirit will expert from Great Xia and Milord's companion, it is enough to restrain or even defeat them. The only thing missing now is the weapon. Ren Baqian finally came to his senses. Did this group of people think that he was sent by the Yun Nation to help them resist? Thinking back, he did say that he was from the Yun Nation. After all, he and Lin Chaola didn't look like Aboriginals. The Aboriginals had never used outsiders before him, so they didn't suspect this. In addition, Lin Chaola was a spirit will expert, and he said that he was here to help them. It was no wonder that there was such a misunderstanding. However, this misunderstanding was a good opportunity. According to him, someone from Great Xia was here too. Or was it a spirit will expert? Great Xia wasn't going to stop and wasn't ready to give up. From what they said, it seemed like they were going to make a big move. Needless to say, as long as he followed their words, he might even be able to infiltrate the enemy. At the very least, he knew that they were preparing something big. When the time came, he could inform Shiwanya and get rid of them. After getting rid of these people who were up to no good, it would be much easier to deal with the remnant citizens of the Hound Nation. After thinking for a while, Ren Baqian immediately came up with an idea. You don't have the right to know my identity. You just need to know that I'm here to help you, Ren Baqian said faintly and put on airs. In fact, after seeing his posture, this group of people was even more convinced. This was because the people from Great Xia had the same attitude. Regardless of whether it was the people from Great Xia or the Yun nation, they looked at them as if they were looking at stray dogs. It was normal for them to be arrogant. Where is that person from Great Xia now? Ren Baqian asked. He went to the Golden Ring residence previously. His current location isn't something we know. Although the Nine Blades sect was considered pretty good in the vicinity of Longzhou City, it was only a small sect in the entire Tianjing basin. Naturally, they wouldn't know too much. Consider yourselves lucky. If not for the fact that I still need your help this time, none of you will be able to go back after attacking me. Everyone was drenched in cold sweat. They were really lucky to be able to escape with their lives after attacking a spirit wool expert. When they returned, they would definitely offer incense to the patriarch. Renbaqian muttered to himself, "Leave 2 people behind to guide me. The rest of you can go back." "Sir, I'll stay behind." The one who spoke was the rather quick-witted man from before. Previously, before everyone could react, he was the first to surrender. At this moment, he was the first to do so. He also had his own thoughts. Previously, he did it to survive, but now, he wanted to hug Renbaqian's thigh. As long as he hugged Renbaqian's thigh, even if the rebellion against the Aboriginals failed in the future, he might still be brought away. Furthermore, when the war started, he wouldn't be sent as cannon fodder to the front lines. "Sir, I'll also stay behind to guide you. If there's any trouble, I'll be able to solve it for you." The other person who spoke was the Earth Will expert who hadn't made a move since the beginning. His thoughts were similar. Although an Earth Will expert had a higher status, it also depended on which sect he was from. "The 2 of you stay behind. The rest of you can get lost. Bring the 2 people on the ground with you as well." Renbaqian waved his hand. He couldn't be bothered with why those 2 people followed him. There were already more important things to do. Everyone looked at each other, cupped their fists toward Renbaqian, and left with their heads lowered. Only an old Earth Will expert and a Man Will expert from the Nine Blades sect were left standing there obediently. Renbaqian stretched his back and said to the 2 people in front of him, "I don't know much about the situation here. This time, I'm only here because I received orders. Tell me what you know." He didn't expect to encounter such a situation as soon as he entered Tianjing Basin. He was really lucky. Chapter 438. A few disciples from the Nine Blades sect tied the Death Toad and Lin Yuan to their horses and left under the cover of the night. Along the way, everyone looked at these 2 people from time to time. If they were killed, the Death Toad would be finished. If they were to make a move now, no one would know. That person from the Yun nation would probably not care about such a small matter. "I'm afraid there will be a war in the future. At least the 2 of them are a fighting force." In the end, the Earth Will elder whose face was scratched by Lin Qiao sighed, and everyone gave up on this idea. In the wilderness on both sides of the road, a man and a woman hid in the dark and watched this group of people pass by with suspicious expressions. "How did that coward Lin Yuan end up in the hands of the Nine Blades sect?" a woman asked in a languid voice. "Are they chasing after the 2 people you mentioned?" the man asked. "Most likely, but the situation is a little strange. Are we still going?" "I'm afraid there's a problem. Go back and find out where the 2 people from the Nine Blades sect went." After daybreak, Renbaqian and the others headed toward the Golden Ring residence. It would normally take 4 days to travel from Longzhou City to Jiaisei City, but it took them 5 days. Along the way, Renbaqian obtained a lot of useful information from the 2 people from the Nine Blades sect. They knew a lot more than what Renbaqian had inquired about previously. After all, there were many things that these sects knew, but ordinary people didn't. The division of power in Tianjing Basin was much more complicated than what he knew from Shiwanya. There were more than a dozen powers and hundreds of sects, big and small. Their relationships were intricate and chaotic. However, there was also an alliance behind them that had been contacting all sides to prepare for an uprising. This alliance was led by 3 major powers and 8 major sections. Among them, the 3 major factions were the 3 biggest factions in Tianjin Basin, and they controlled almost all the cities in Tianjin Basin. They were the North Alliance, the Southern Metropolis, and the Green Bellflower. Among them, the North Alliance was the most powerful, followed by the Southern Metropolis, and the Green Bellflower was the smallest. However, the internal structure of these 3 powers was also complicated. One of the 8 major sects was the Golden Ring Residence. Its sphere of influence covered 6 cities, not the 3 that Rinpoche had heard before. The Golden Ring Residence was the smallest of the 8 major sections. The largest one was called the Spiritual Mountain Sect. It was the largest sect in the Northern Alliance. Its sphere of influence encompassed close to 20 cities. Many of the generals in the Northern Alliance came from the Spiritual Mountain Sect. In addition, among these 8 big sects, there was one that Rinpoche found rather interesting. It was called the Mengsing Pavilion, and it was located within the territory of the Green Bellflower. It was said that all the members of the pavilion were women, and one of the pavilion masters was called Qingling. From this name, one could guess the relationship between the 2 parties. Along the way, Rinpoche felt more than once that these 2 people from the 9 Blades sect were really stupid. They didn't even have the slightest bit of suspicion towards him. They didn't even know his exact identity before telling him everything they knew. However, thinking about it, it was probably because the ancient race had never had any outsiders before. The ancient race and the other races were mutually exclusive. The 2 of them had never doubted that they would stand on the side of the ancient race. In addition, they were too desperate for outside support. They wanted to get out of this cage and take back their original land. At the thought of this, he felt that they were rather pitiful. Although he was pitiful, he could not pity him. There was no right or wrong between the 2 sides. It was just that their positions were different, and they were enemies. After walking like this for 5 days, everyone finally arrived at GCI City, where the Golden Ring Residence was located. After arriving, everyone first found an inn. The Earthwill experts from the 9 Blades sect went to the Golden Ring Residence to deliver the visiting card, while Rinpoche took Lin Chaola for a stroll in GCI City. GCI City was much bigger and more prosperous than Longzhou City. The streets were considered well organized. The lives of the ordinary people here were slightly better than in Longzhou City. At the very least, they looked better. Their clothes were still very old, but they were considered clean and didn't have many patches. However, they were only slightly better off. The ordinary people were still considered sallow and emaciated. In general, after visiting these 2 cities, Rinpoche roughly understood the living conditions of the remnant citizens of the Hao Nation. Poverty had always surrounded them, and having a full stomach was probably their biggest wish. In addition, what attracted Rinpoche was the various shops on both sides of the street. Whether it was daily necessities like salt or cloth, the prices here were 50% higher than in Lan City. In addition to those common shops, there were also many unique shops. For example, a bone grinder shop specialized in sharpening bone knives, arrowheads, and other weapons. Rinpoche specially went in for a walk and finally bought a bone knife. This kind of bone knife had a very sharp edge and was almost as sharp as an iron knife. Its biggest flaw was its hardness and toughness, which couldn't be compared to iron products. If it were to be chopped by an iron knife, cracks would appear after a few hits. Some bones had good toughness and hardness and could be made into knives that could be used for a long time. However, these were very expensive and weren't affordable for ordinary people. Is that the disciple of the Golden Ring Residence? Rinpoche raised his chin at the back of a figure in the crowd in the distance. From where he stood, he could see the other party. He was carrying a long bone knife with a row of 9 golden rings on the back of it. When walking, the golden rings would make a crisp sound when they hit the back of the bone knife. Previously, Renbochin had heard from them that these golden rings were made using a special method. When wielding the bone knife, these golden rings would make an ear-piercing sound that would interfere with the other party's 5 senses and easily make the other party impatient. If one were to fight with a disciple of the Golden Ring residents under the sun, not only would one have to be careful of being disturbed by these golden rings, but they would also have to be careful of the reflection of the light. The Golden Ring residents had a unique technique. When wielding the knife, these golden rings would reflect the sunlight and form countless light fragments that would interfere with the other party's vision. With their ears and eyes disrupted by light, it would be difficult for even a level 1 Golden Ring resident's disciple to deal with them. Yes, sir, the 9-Blade Sect disciple replied. The 9-Blade Sect disciple replied. This person's name was Lu Xing, and the Earthwill elder was called Lu Chongmei. While Renbochin was strolling around the city, the Empress was sitting in the garden in a daze. Without that person by her side, these days were getting more and more boring. She wasn't even interested in watching television. Sure enough, it was more interesting when he was around. In the past, she had always been alone and didn't feel anything. However, after having someone by her side, it was especially easy to feel lonely. Has there been any news from him? The Empress asked without raising her head. Your Majesty, Sir Ren didn't bring the radio with him this time. Qing Yuan whispered behind her. After that, she turned her head and stuck out her tongue at Hong Wuan. Her eyes were full of smiles as she thought, Sir Ren has only been gone for a few days and Her Majesty already misses him. The Empress sat for a long time before getting up and walking to the candy tree. The candy on the tree was already 1/3 gone. At that time, Renbochin had solemnly vowed that he would return after finishing the candy. The Empress picked up a pair of scissors and cut off another piece of candy. When she looked again, there was only half of it left. If he doesn't return after finishing the candy, I will tie him up and hang him on the tree. The Empress raised her eyebrows and thought to herself. She heard that there were 23 ways to tie someone up. She could try all of them. Chapter 439. When Renbochin returned to the inn, he saw a few short-legged horses at the entrance and a few disciples of the Golden Ring sect with bone knives on their backs standing there. The surrounding pedestrians carefully avoided them and didn't dare to approach. The bustling street highlighted these people. The Golden Ring residence was extremely powerful locally. Even the warlord of Thorn City had to be courteous to them, let alone ordinary people who naturally stayed far away. Upon seeing Renbochin and Lin Chaola, they sized them up, and one of the disciples cupped his hands and asked, "Are you sir from the Yun nation?" "Yes." Renbochin nodded. "Our elder is waiting for you in the inn," the disciple said respectfully. Renbochin nodded and strode into the inn. Someone inside had already heard the commotion outside. He walked out with large strides and said in a clear voice, "Young master, you must be from the Yun nation. It must have been a long journey." Renbochin looked up. It was a man of about 40 years old. He was thin, had sharp eyebrows, a gentle attitude, and exuded a steady charm. On Earth, even if he was 40 years old, there would be plenty of women who would fight for him. He was only slightly less handsome than Renbochin. "I'm Ling Ziquan, an elder of the Golden Ring residence in charge of external affairs." "Greetings, sir. There's no need for formalities. You should be clear about my purpose for coming here," Renbochin said faintly. "I've heard a little about it. This isn't a place to entertain guests, and we have neglected you by staying here. Arrangements have been made, so please move over and let the Golden Ring residents play the host," Ling Ziquan said with a smile. "All right." Renbochin nodded slightly. He knew that entering the Golden Ring residence was just the beginning. Although this person's attitude was respectful, it wasn't as respectful as the people from the Nine Blades sect. After all, this was the difference between a large and a small sect, and he reckoned that it wouldn't be as easy to fool as the people from the Nine Blades sect. He had to pass the test of the Golden Ring residence before he could come into contact with more things. If he was exposed, he was afraid that Lin Qiao would have to escape with him. One had to know that there was a spirit will expert in the Golden Ring residence. There were a total of 13 famous spirit will experts in the entire Tianjing basin. Each of the 8 major sects had one, and the largest sect, Lingshan, had 2. However, even though there were 13 spirit will experts, these remnant citizens of the Han nation still didn't dare to act rashly. At the same level, the aboriginal experts who had reached the cardinal heaven level were too terrifying, and the spirit will experts in Tianjing basin could only rank in the bottom half of the spirit will experts. Previously, when Great Xia attacked Ziyue City, 7 spirit will experts besieged Xiongyu, the deputy protector general of the Protectorate of the North. Xiongyu died, and 2 of Great Xia's spirit will experts died in battle. The Protector General of the South, Shi Wanya, was stronger than Xiongyu. Together with the other 2 Cardinal Heaven experts, the 13 spirit will experts didn't dare to act rashly. As a result, these remnant citizens of the Han nation needed weapons and spirit will experts for external support. Ren Baqian was now a citizen of the Yun nation and had a spirit will expert as his bodyguard. As such, he was naturally treated with the highest level of respect. Everyone left the city and headed towards the most eye-catching mountain peak in the northwest direction. When they got closer, they saw that there were layers of pavilions and pavilions from the foot of the mountain to the waist of the mountain. The buildings were vaguely visible among the trees. Although the Golden Ring residence was a sect, its location was the size of a small town. When they got closer, they could see a mountain gate in front of them. On both sides, there were stone walls that were 3 meters tall that enclosed the entire Golden Ring residence. Only the eaves were exposed. In front of the mountain gate, 4 disciples stood on both sides. They were all wearing yellow shirts and brown pleated skirts with bone knives on their backs. A group of people hurriedly walked out of the mountain gate and welcomed Ren Baqian and the others. First, they exchanged conventional greetings. The person who came was the chief of the Golden Ring residence, Zhan Chongkong. He looked to be around 60 years old and had a dignified appearance. Behind him was his wife, who looked to be in her early 30s. She had a graceful figure and was extremely beautiful. However, Ren Baqian had heard from the people of the Nine Blades sect about some famous characters in the Golden Ring residence. He knew that this person was already over 40 years old and was a famous beauty when she was young. She was known as the Painting Fairy, and it was said that her painting skills were superb. In addition to the 2 of them, there were also the 2 inner deacons, the law enforcement deacon, and the outer deacon beside him. Out of the 6 deacons in the residence, 4 appeared. After all, Ren Baqian was an envoy from the Yun nation, and they had no choice but to treat him seriously. Even without mentioning Ren Baqian's identity, Lin Qiao's strength as a spirit will expert was enough for them to treat her this way. "Young master, you have another companion. Is she in the carriage?" After the conventional greetings, Zhan Chongkong asked. He was still very curious about this spirit will expert. He heard that this person was only a young lady, but she was already at the spirit will level. He was afraid that there would be another person like Qi Zixiao and Li Yuanzhu in the future. Ren Baqian turned his head and opened the curtains. Indeed, Lin Qiao was sleeping soundly inside. She had really let go of herself during these 2 trips with him. She was even more so than when she was in Qingxin Palace Hall. Ren Baqian didn't say anything. He took out a piece of milk candy and threw it into his mouth. After chewing it twice, he blew on Lin Qiao. Then, Lin Qiao lay there with her eyes closed, sniffled, and swam toward him. Looking at her salted posture, Rinpoche really wanted to take off his shoes and stretch out his feet without saying anything. If he remembered correctly, Lin Chaola's sense of smell was much more sensitive than that of ordinary people. However, it was a little inhumane to do so, so he eventually gave up on this tempting idea. It was mainly because Rinpoche was afraid that she would scratch him out of anger. Count to 3. Otherwise, I will throw this candy away. Rinpoche took out a piece of candy and slowly unwrapped it. 3. Rinpoche turned around and threw the candy into the distance. A gust of wind blew past Rinpoche. Lin Chaola appeared in the air, grabbed the white rabbit creamy candy, threw it into her mouth, and questioned him, "What about 1 and 2? Do you even know how to count?" Ha! Rinpoche felt that it was really embarrassing to be questioned by someone from Dayo like this. Everyone looked at Rinpoche teasing the spirit wool expert like he was teasing a pet. They couldn't believe that this was the spirit wool expert. However, when she came out of the carriage to catch the candy, she displayed her agility and speed. Everyone had to admit that she was indeed a spirit wool expert. In everyone's impression, spirit wool experts were either dignified, arrogant, or otherworldly. At least, this was what they knew. For example, it was rare to see the great elder in the sect even once a month. Most of the time, he would only practice hard in the mountains or climb over the cliffs around the basin to search for medicinal herbs. Every time they met, he would only say a few words. In their minds, this was how a spirit wool expert should be. Lin Chaola was too different from the spirit wool experts that they knew. However, after carefully sizing her up, she looked to be about 16 or 17 years old. Her body hadn't matured yet, her hair was tied up in a simple bun, and her face was delicate and pretty. In a few years, she might even become a beauty. She was wearing a silk tube top and a short skirt, which was somewhat similar to how the Aboriginals dressed. However, perhaps this was the current trend in the Yun Nation. After taking a closer look at Lin Chaola's appearance, everyone suffered another blow. Thinking about how they were already so old and hadn't even crossed the path to heaven, they felt that they had wasted their years. They had to admit that there were indeed geniuses in this world. "I'm Jean Chongkong. Please." Jean Chongkong sorted out his emotions and introduced himself. Seeing that Lin Chaola didn't seem to care, he gestured to Rinpoche. Rinpoche and Jean Chongkong walked side by side while Lin Chaola stared at the bag of candy hanging from Rinpoche's neck. Her gaze swayed along with the candy bag. Painting Fairy wanted to chat with her, but she didn't know her temperament. Seeing that her attention was focused on the person in front of her, she gave up on the idea. However, she thought to herself that she didn't know what was so special about this man from the Yun Nation that such a genius would favor him so much that she couldn't bear to let go of him. If Rinpoche knew what she was thinking, he would laugh like crazy. Chapter 440. Where are you two from? How should I address you? Wang Jing, my surname is Yi. Call me Yi Yunxian. Rinpoche made up a random name. He didn't know much about the Yun Nation and only knew of 2 places. One was the capital of the Yun Nation, Wang Jing, and the other was Qingfeng City. As for the culprit, she only knew of one person, Yi Ku, the warlord of Qingfeng City. That fellow had the audacity to rob her of a batch of silver, and the Empress had already arranged for his entire family to be exterminated. After all, he was only pretending to be a Yun Nation merchant at the beginning. He didn't do much research on the various aspects of the Yun Nation. He didn't expect that a freak combination of factors would lead to the current situation. Wild cloud immortal, overflowing with immortal chi. What a good name, Painting Fairy praised. Previously, the 2 of you from the 9 Blades sect did not speak in detail. I wonder if Mr. Yi could tell us the detailed purpose of your visit. External Warden Ling Ziquan asked. His question was also what everyone wanted to ask. This was what everyone wanted to know the most at the moment. At this moment, everyone was in the middle of the banquet. 17 glowing pearls hung in the air. The light was very good and soft, not dazzling at all. It was also not as oppressive as the lamps. The entire hall was brightly lit. Renbachien looked at it enviously. This wasn't an ordinary night luminescent pearl. Night luminescent pearls weren't this bright. This thing was almost as bright as a 40-watt light bulb. It could definitely be considered a treasure. At the highest table were Zhang Chongkong and Painting Fairy. Slightly below them were Renbachien and Lin Chaola. Further below them were the 2 people from the Nine Blades sect. Opposite him were the 6 great deacons of the Golden Ring residence. At this time, he finally saw all of them. We have the same enemy. As he spoke, he glanced at Lin Chaola from the corner of his eye and saw that she was setting up a tower. She piled up the candies that Renbachien had just given her, took out a piece from the pile, and scattered it all over the place. Everyone nodded in agreement. The Aboriginals were indeed their common enemy. They occupied your homes and forced you to live and reproduce in such a place. Most of you will never be able to take a step out of here. Like a bird in a cage. A mournful look appeared on everyone's face. Renbachien's words struck a chord in their hearts. No one was willing to be kept like a caged bird here, even if this place was so big that most ordinary people wouldn't be able to walk around it in their entire lives. That did not hide the fact that they were being held here. The vast and boundless world outside was what they yearned for. This is the best chance you've had in years. Dayo has just had a war with Great Xia and is now at war with us. They have almost no time to care about other things. If you launch an attack at this time, they will be attacked from the front and rear, and will definitely be in chaos. With us restraining the northeastern forces, the pressure on you will be the least. In the north, there was still Great Xia. Presumably, they would not sit idly by. At that time, there would be wars everywhere, and they would definitely not be able to hold on. This is your best chance to leave this place and take back your original land. Renbachien spoke very slowly. Even though he was talking about something that everyone already knew, it struck a chord in everyone's heart because everyone was thinking the same thing. Wasn't this the reason why the people from Great Xia came? This was indeed the best opportunity in 70 years. If he wanted to wait for another opportunity, who knew how long it would take? How many years would it take? We are aware of this matter as well. However, it wasn't just empty talk if he wanted to start a war. I wonder if you can give us some help? Zhang Chongkong asked bluntly. Both parties had the same goal, so there was no need to probe each other. What he wanted was to get to the point as soon as possible. 20,000 spear tips and 5,000 swords. Of course, these aren't free gifts, Renbachien said faintly. What are your conditions? You need to start a war as soon as possible, preferably within 3 months. In addition, there are some things that I'm afraid you can't decide on, Renbachien said. Even though everything was fake, the conditions still had to be stated. The harsher the conditions, the easier it would be for the other party to believe them. If he didn't state any conditions, there might be some loopholes. Many times, people were strange. On one hand, they hoped that others would be more generous to them. On the other hand, when the other party was really generous, they would become suspicious. We aren't ready yet. Zhang Chongkong said. Time flies. By the time you are ready, Dayo will be ready too. According to the information I received, they are already training new soldiers. How many? Zhang Chongkong quickly asked. 40,000. As soon as he said this, the room suddenly became quiet. 40,000 soldiers wouldn't be able to do much in either Great Xia or the Yun Nation. But if it were 40,000 ancient race soldiers, that wouldn't be a small number. There was silence in the room. Renbachien looked down while the others pondered in silence. This matter is too big and doesn't involve the Golden Ring residents alone. We will discuss it later. Mr. Yi, why don't you meet the higher-ups of our alliance and discuss this in detail? This matter wasn't something that the Golden Ring residents could decide. Zhang Chongkong thought about it and put this matter aside. It was enough for him and the others to know the purpose of this person and some other information. The rest would be left to others. When can I meet the higher-ups of your alliance? Renbachien asked. I don't have much time to waste here. Mr. Yi, you must be tired from the long journey. After tonight's banquet, we will send someone to send you there tomorrow. The journey will take 8 to 9 days. Let's toast to Mr. Yi first. No matter what, you are our friend. Zhang Chongkong raised his wine cup and toasted him from afar. Cheers. Renbachien drank it in one gulp. His eyes moved slightly. The taste of this wine was unexpectedly good. Even though the alcohol content wasn't high, it was sweet and palatable. There was also a kind of plant fragrance. After drinking this cup of wine, he felt refreshed and the tiredness from the continuous days of travel had dissipated. Mr. Yi should have never drunk this wine before. After brewing, this wine has to be stored in the trunk of a hanging tree for a year before being sealed in a mud jar for 3 years. The wine that Mr. Yi drinks is produced from a 1,000-year-old hanging tree. Every year, less than 50 liters are brewed. Even I can't bear to drink it. Indeed, it's not bad. Renbachien nodded. He finally found a good point about the remnant citizens of the Hao Nation. This wine was brewed rather well. In the future, he could gather a group of people to specialize in brewing wine. Come. Zhang Chongkong clapped his hands again. 16 young girls around 16 years old entered the hall. 8 of them held musical instruments and stood at the side. The other 8 girls held ribbons in their hands and danced in the room. As the girls danced, their graceful figures were faintly discernible under the light muslin. Their ribbons fluttered in the air, attracting Renbachien's attention. He had to admit that the remnant citizens of the Hao Nation were much better than the Aboriginals in this aspect. The dance of the Aboriginals was full of primitive wildness. Even though it was interesting to watch it occasionally, it wasn't as suitable and aesthetically pleasing as the dance of the young girls in the hall. In particular, one of the young girls exuded the vitality of a young girl from head to toe. Her skin was fair, her appearance was excellent, and every frown and smile was extremely attractive. Compared to the 2 outstanding girls that he had seen in this world, her appearance wasn't inferior at all. The most attractive thing was her eyes. They were clear and full of curiosity, as if she was a young girl who didn't know about the world. Renbachien found a second good point about the remnant citizens of the Hao Nation. When the time comes, he could gather a group of them and dance in the palace when he had nothing to do. Well, he also had to get those 17 pearls on his head back. Zhang Chongkong paid attention to Renbachien's expression. Seeing that Renbachien was fond of them, he smiled and said, "If Mr. Yi likes them, I can make the decision to give them to you. I only hope that you will treat them well in the future." Residence Chief. The rest of the people were immediately shocked. The rest of the 8 girls didn't matter, but one of them was the residence chief's youngest daughter. She was usually treated like a treasure by the residence chief. She actually appeared among these people. This was enough to shock everyone. However, Zhang Chongkong's words were even more shocking. Everyone looked at Painting Fairy, but realized that she didn't seem to have heard anything. Zhang Chongkong looked at Renbachien with a smile in his eyes. There was also a tinge of anticipation in his eyes. He thought to himself, no matter what, there will be a battle in the future. If they won, it would be fine. If they lost, I'm afraid that not many people would survive. In particular, Deo wouldn't let people like the Golden Ring residents stay. Even though sending Kai-Hsien away didn't sound good, it was an opportunity for her. Even if she lost, she could still survive. Chapter 441. After hearing Zhang Changkong's words, it would be a lie if Renbochin said he wasn't moved. He didn't care about the rest, except for the girl. Not only was she beautiful, but her eyes were also as clear and transparent as a lake. There was also the innocence in her eyes, as well as the curiosity of a baby. To men, this was a fatal temptation, and they wanted to protect that innocence. However, thinking about the Empress who was still waiting for him to feed her and his identity, Renbochin shook his head and said, "Thank you for your kindness, but I appreciate it." "Why? You don't like her?" Zhang Changkong couldn't help but ask. At this moment, his mood was extremely complicated. If Renbochin accepted directly, he would be worried. But if he rejected it, he would be unhappy. How could he reject his own daughter? Was this person blind? "I'm here to form an alliance and have no interest in anything else." Renbochin still rejected. After he rejected, he realized that those attendants were relieved, but Zhang Changkong was very unhappy. This made him wonder if Zhang Changkong really liked to give away his daughter. Also, why did those attendants feel relieved? "Just now, you even said something to stop me. Could it be that your lover is inside?" As the dance ended, these women left one after another. Renbochin felt a little regretful because those eyes were really unforgettable. At night, when Renbochin went back to rest, Zhang Changkong and Painting Fairy returned to their room. "Are you really in such a hurry? Aren't you afraid of entrusting her to the wrong person?" Painting Fairy asked after entering the room. Previously, she acted as if she didn't hear anything, but now that she was back, she immediately spoke. It was obvious that she wasn't calm. "Although you mentioned this before, I didn't expect you to be so anxious. We just met, and you don't even know his temperament. You actually want to entrust Hsien to him. Time waits for no man. Qi Zixiao has already arrived in Goose City. At this time, she isn't in Lawn City, but is here. It's hard to predict her intentions." Zhang Changkong sighed. "What?" Painting Fairy was shocked when she heard this. Everyone in the entire Tianjing basin feared and hated that famous woman. "Is this true?" "It can't be wrong," Zhang Changkong said. "Therefore, even if I don't understand this person, I can't care too much. If there are unforeseen circumstances, it will be too late to consider this matter." Moreover, Deo wasn't scary. What was terrifying was the endless number of barbarians in the 60,000 mountains. Even if they managed to get out of the valley, he did not know if they would be able to chase the barbarians back and block their counterattack. He did not know how many people would die and how many would survive. What's more, Kai-Hsien is too pure. If something happens to us, I'm afraid that she will suffer a lot in the future. Since that was the case, he might as well find a backer. "We don't have that much time and opportunity to slowly choose," Zhang Changkong said after a pause. Under normal circumstances, his daughter's looks would naturally be the target of countless pursuers. But in times of chaos, it became her disaster. In addition, she was innocent and ignorant of worldly affairs. Whether or not she could protect herself in this chaotic world was truly worrying. Rather than that, it was better to find a backer. No matter how bad it was, it wouldn't be that bad. After listening to Zhang Changkong's words, a complicated expression appeared on Painting Fairy's face. Although she was reluctant, she didn't speak anymore. "What now?" "Tomorrow, the mansion will send someone to send him to Heavenly Cloud Mountain and have Kai-Hsien go with him. With Kai Xian's talent, looks, and temperament, no man will not be tempted after interacting with her for a few days, Zhang Chongkong said with a complicated expression. After a long time, Painting Fairy sighed, got up, and left the room. The next morning, Ren Baqian woke Lin Chaola up after washing his face. In order to keep her awake, he played a little game with her. He threw the candy to the left, and Lin Chaola appeared in the air like a gust of wind. Then, Ren Baqian took out another candy and threw it to the right. After catching 5 or 6 candies, Lin Chaola couldn't help but say faintly, "Why do I feel that something isn't right? You eat and sleep every day. You will get fat and your body will rust. You need to exercise." Ren Baqian threw a candy behind him, and Lin Chaola immediately disappeared from his sight. Cough, cough. Ling Ziquan, who had been standing in front of the courtyard for a long time, didn't know how to react. Finally, he coughed. "Mr. Yi, please have breakfast." Following Ling Ziquan's words, a few maids brought their breakfast to the courtyard. "If there's anything you don't like, just tell me. When do we set off?" Ren Baqian asked. "We can set off after breakfast." After breakfast, Ren Baqian packed up his things and waited for someone to call them. After about 2 hours, Ren Baqian was a little impatient when Ling Ziquan finally arrived. "Mr. Yi, everything has been arranged. Please follow me." As Ling Ziquan walked out, they realized that they were on the way to the mountain gate. When they were near the gate, they saw a large group of people in the distance. "Mr. Yi, I have already arranged for someone to bring you there. There will be someone to take care of things along the way, so you don't have to worry." Zhang Chongkong turned around and cupped his hands when he saw Ren Baqian. "Thank you." Ren Baqian cupped his hands. Then, the crowd split into 2. In front of them were 6 horses and a rather gorgeous carriage, as well as the ox cart that Ren Baqian came with. "Mr. Yi, let's cut to the chase. We will meet again in the future." "Let's drink and chat merrily when we meet again." Zhang Chongkong cupped his hands. "Let's meet again." Ren Baqian cupped his hands, thinking that when they met again, they would probably want to swallow him alive. Since that was the case, it was better not to meet again. At least after staying at the Golden Ring sect for a night, he didn't have a bad impression of this place. Unfortunately, they were on different sides and were destined to be enemies. There was nothing much to say. "Let's meet again." Everyone cupped their hands. Ren Baqian looked at the 2 carriages in front of him. Seeing that no one wanted him to get on the carriage, he got on his own ox cart. Then, 8 people came out from the crowd and got on their horses. 2 of them were responsible for driving the carriage. One of them was the elder in charge of external affairs, Ling Ziquan. As for the 2 people from the 9 Blades sect, he didn't see them. "Mr. Yi, just let me know if anything happens along the way." Ling Ziquan smiled at Ren Baqian as he sat on the horse. His smile was complicated. Ren Baqian nodded, turned his head, nodded at Zhang Chongkong and the rest, and entered the ox cart. When the ox cart started its journey, Ren Baqian began to ponder about the carriage behind. When he first saw it, he thought it was prepared for the 2 of them. He didn't expect it to be completely different, which made him feel a little strange. Could it be that there was something on this carriage? Ren Baqian's mind raced. Could it be that the dancers from yesterday were on it? He didn't know if that woman was among them. However, even if there was, he wouldn't dare to accept them. If he did, the Empress would skin him and hang him on the city wall to dry him like bacon. He was very clear about the Empress's temperament. If he went to a brothel to drink in Lawn City, as long as he didn't go overboard, the Empress might turn a blind eye. Moreover, there was Tong Zhenye, the old bastard, to take the blame for him. The Empress seemed to be more interested in beating him up. However, if he wanted to keep a mistress in his golden house, he Renbocchen thought for a while and didn't think too much about it. At most, he would ask Ling Ziquan to bring her back when they reached the destination. Whoever wanted her could have her, but he didn't dare to. They traveled all the way until noon, when everyone stopped to take a break. Renbocchen had been paying attention to the movements of the carriage. Sure enough, when the carriage stopped, a hand reached out to the side and pulled open the curtain. A girl's face appeared from behind the curtain. It's really her, Renbocchen thought. It was the girl from last night, whose eyes were as clear as the bottom of a lake and who gave people the feeling that she was ignorant of worldly affairs. At this moment, she was wearing a light green dress and had her hair combed into a young girl's bun. Compared to yesterday, she looked more lively. Mr. Yi, father asked me to send you to Mount Tianyun. That girl imitated others and cupped her hands at Renbocchen. Following which, she grinned innocently. Your father. Is he? Renbocchen immediately caught this word. 3rd Mississippi, Ling Ziquan nodded at the girl and said to Renbocchen, she is the youngest daughter of the chief. This time, she will accompany me to send Mr. Yi to Mount Tianyun. Renbocchen looked at that girl and couldn't wrap his head around it. Yesterday, Zhang Changkong almost gave those dancers to him, right? Didn't that include her? Or did he misunderstand something? He must have misunderstood something. Yesterday, she shouldn't have been included. It was just the others. However, that didn't make much sense. The other girls from last night could only be said to be good-looking, nothing more. For Renbocchen, who was used to seeing the Empress and Li Yuanzhu, they weren't attractive at all. Compared to the flat-chested girl, Lin Chaola, she was a little inferior. He really didn't expect that the chief of the Golden Ring residence would actually let his own daughter dance. Renbocchen pondered and felt that he might have misunderstood yesterday. Chapter 442. Mr. Yi, is it very big outside? Mr. Yi, how big is it outside? Mr. Yi, have you seen the sea before? What does the sea look like? What color is it? I read that there are no boundaries. Is that true? Mr. Yi, since noon, Renbocchen had been hearing Mr. Yi and questions. Renbocchen couldn't help but ask, are you 100,000 wise? Although Renbocchen said this, he didn't feel annoyed. This girl had a special quality that made it hard for people to hate her. Even if she asked some very childish questions, it would only make people feel that this was how she should be. What is 100,000 wise? Renbocchen was speechless. You will know when you see it with your own eyes in the future. It's better to see it with your own eyes than to hear it from others, Renbocchen replied. He had never seen the sea in this world. What if he said it was blue, but it was actually red, yellow, green, or black? There was also the Red Sea and the Black Sea on Earth. Although he had never been there and didn't know if they were really red or black, at least some parts of the Yellow Sea were indeed yellow, mainly because there was too much sand in the water and the seawater was turbid. I don't know when I can go out and take a look. Speaking of going out, Zhang Kaixian was a little distracted. She hadn't even gone far before, and the furthest she went was when she went to Mount Tianyun with her father. As for Tianjing Basin, she knew from a very young age that she couldn't go out because it was full of ferocious barbarians. Her father and the uncles in the residence all hated the barbarians. She was imperceptibly influenced from a young age, so she didn't hate the barbarians. She just wanted to go out and take a look. She heard that the outside world was very big and beautiful, even more beautiful than the Golden Ring residence. Zhang Kaixian was in a daze for a moment. Renbocchen looked at the side of her face before shifting his gaze elsewhere. Zhang Kaixian had the characteristics of immigrants from the Hao nation. Her forehead was very wide, her facial features weren't very exquisite, and her mouth was a little big. However, her facial features were just right on her face, giving people a breathtaking feeling. No matter who saw her, their first reaction would be that she was beautiful. Renbochin didn't mind admiring her beauty, but he didn't want to get too close to her. "Mr. Yi, is the Yun nation very big? I heard them say that it's very prosperous, even more prosperous than Jisei City." Zhang Kaixian only stayed quiet for a while before turning her attention to a new problem. After Zhang Kaixian asked a bunch of questions, she suddenly stopped and stared in one direction. After a few minutes, she ran over happily. Renbochin was a little astonished at first. He looked at her and realized that she was chasing a butterfly. A journey that would normally take 8 to 9 days had taken Renbochin and his group 12 days. On 2 of those days, Renbochin returned to Earth, and there were other times when Zhang Kaixian chased butterflies and other insects far away. Even though Renbochin tried his best to avoid it, he still became familiar with the girl named Zhang Kaixian after 12 days. After all, she was the kind of girl that was hard to guard against and hated. Even if they knew that they were enemies, they would gradually accept her. Even Lin Qiaolo was very familiar with her. However, being familiar didn't mean that their relationship was good. On the contrary, there was a reason why their relationship wasn't so good. It happened on a sunny afternoon. When the flower fades, the green apricot grows small. When swallows fly, green water and people circle. The willows on the branches blow less and less. There are plenty of fish in the sea. A swing on the wall and a path on the other side. Passers-by outside the wall, while the beauty on the wall laughs. The laughter gradually subsides, and the sound gradually dies down. Amorous feelings are annoyed by heartless feelings. Renbochin pulled open the curtain of the carriage and looked inside. He saw Zhang Kaixian poking her head out to look at the road on both sides. She was singing a song with a happy expression on her face. Zhang Kaixian's face was filled with joy. In fact, she was always happy. These days, Renbochin saw happiness, cheerfulness, and vitality in her every day. It was as if the word worry didn't exist for her. The people who were traveling with her looked at her with doting eyes. Her cheerfulness also infected the others, and even the journey wasn't so boring. "Let's take a break," Renbochin said to the driver as he stretched. After a while, the entire group stopped by the roadside. Next to them was a stretch of farmland. There were farmers doing farm work, and there were also children running on the small paths between the fields. The group stopped, and everyone dismounted from their horses to stretch their muscles. "Mr. Yi, what kind of clothes do people wear in the Yun nation? Is it the kind you wear?" Zhang Kaixian jumped off the carriage, ran to Renbochin's side, and continued to ask questions. However, after a few minutes, she saw a butterfly in the distance and ran over happily. Renbochin felt that she probably knew martial arts, which could be seen from the way she got off the carriage. However, when she chased after the butterfly, she acted like an ordinary person. She didn't reveal any martial arts, and her movements were a little clumsy. After a while, Zhang Kaixian ran back from a distance with a big blue butterfly in her hands. She was very careful, afraid that she would damage the butterfly. Every time she got off the carriage, she couldn't help but catch the butterfly when she saw it. However, when she left, she would release the butterfly. "Look, it's so beautiful." Zhang Kaixian ran to Renbochin's side and held the butterfly with both hands for him to take a look. "Very beautiful," Renbochin echoed. Zhang Kaixian ran to Lin Qiaolo's side and said, "Sister Lin, look. Oh, it's so beautiful." A gust of wind blew, and Zhang Kaixian's hands became empty. "Oh, it's not very delicious." Lin Qiaolo smacked her lips and said with some regret. Zhang Kaixian was stunned. She opened her mouth wide and couldn't say a word for a long time. After a while, she realized that her butterfly had been swallowed by Lin Chaola and quickly ran back to the carriage. Did you do it on purpose? Ren Baqin watched her run back to the carriage before walking to Lin Chaola's side and asking casually. What on purpose? I really want to eat it, but it doesn't taste good, Lin Chaola said lazily. Ren Baqin didn't say anything else. However, when Zhang Kaixian got off the carriage at night, her eyes were a little red. It seemed like she had been crying in the afternoon. He wasn't sure if she was crying about the tragic fate of the butterfly or crying about her baby being eaten by Lin Chaola. This was also the first time Ren Baqin saw her look unhappy. The next day, Zhang Kaixian was full of energy again. However, she didn't go near Lin Chaola anymore after catching the butterfly. When she released the butterfly, she would first check if Lin Chaola had returned to the carriage and acted as if she was guarding against thieves. After 11 days of travel, Mount Tianyun was already in sight. How much longer? Ren Baqin lifted the curtain and asked as he looked at the mountain in the distance. Mr. Yi, we will arrive in 1 day. In Goose City, the Empress looked at the empty candy tree and was in a daze for a long time. Without the colorful candies, this was just a withered tree. After Ren Baqin left, she would be alone. Your Majesty. What do you want to eat for dinner? Hong Wuan asked from behind the Empress. Your Majesty. Hong Wuan called out softly again. What? The Empress came back to her senses. What do you want to eat for dinner? Up to you, the Empress replied faintly. After dinner, the Empress suddenly said, Get ready. I want to go to Tianjing Basin tomorrow to take a look. I still don't know what kind of life the remnant citizens of the Han nation are living under my rule and why they are always restless. Yes. I will inform Protector General Shi to make arrangements. There's no need to inform him, the Empress stopped her. I want to go and take a look myself and don't want to listen to his nonsense. Your Majesty. Qing Yuan and Hong Wuan were shocked. Following which, they asked, Your Majesty, I will inform Deputy Commander Xiong. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.